Project oversight.
Call the Project Oversight Committee meeting to order. It is now 8:07.
Oh, I'm 3 on the
I am
list.
Kaulana Park, the chair. Excused is Vice Chair Lisa Baker. Other member excused is Ed Sniffen. And like to also do the roll call of our committee, Anthony Alto.
Present.
And due to lack of quorum, I'm going to ask that we have an ad hoc committee member for this meeting. To see if Chair Kiko Bukowski be a part of it. Thank you. So we do have quorum. Also, I'd like to recognize the other board members here. John Katahira, Rick Keene, welcome. Thank you. Good to have you. Roger Morton, Kathy Sokugawa, and Natalie Iwasa online. Okay, with that, start off with agenda 2, public testimony. So at this time, if there's any public testimony online or in person on any of the agenda items. Seeing none, hearing none, we'll move to item number 3, the May 2026 monthly progress report, Vince and Corey.
Good morning. Van Suda, Hart Project Director, and with me, Corey Ellis, Director of Project Controls. I'll go through the usual in terms of the monthly report, and if you can go to page 5, Brian. And I'll take this out of order, starting with CCR3 and moving to 4 and then CCGS. So, and I'll give you the latest and greatest in terms of progress and update. CCR3, we did recently issue substantial completion to the contractor. A majority of their work had been complete. I'd say 99.99999% of physical work is complete. Now it's going through documentation, contract closeout. So working with the contractor to get all the documentation needed, as-built, record drawings, and then finalize the final value of the contract and go through the final numbers between us and the contractor. So continue to work that, hoping to get that completed in the next few months. CCR 4 and 4E, majority of the paving on Dillingham is complete. So if you have the opportunity to drive down Dillingham, nice and smooth, nice new paving out there. There are some exceptions to some driveways that need to be completed and some side streets like Koho, Kokea Center area driveways that need to be paved. But Dillingham's looking pretty good in terms of paving and the smoothness when you drive through there. Kalihi intersection has all new traffic signals. That's all active now. So continue to close out these intersections. We talked early on how Kalihi was going to lag in terms of getting that intersection completed, but can now say that the traffic signals are completed there. Koho and Kokea intersection is still being worked on. There's still some overhead lines that need to be removed in terms of going Malka to Makai. Not too much on the Dillingham east to west direction, but Malka, Makai, and then the curb and ramps that need to be completed in that area. So contractor continues to work through Koho and Kokea intersections. The 12 kV infrastructure had been, the last of it has been released. So all the primaries for the 12 kV is being worked on, Akepo to Kahi area. So that very short section at the east end of Dillingham. We're going to do cabling and then hopefully get that energized and finalize the last of the 12 kV on Dillingham. In terms of 138, 5 of the 6 sweeps that we've been talking about has been completed. The last one is at the Kahi substation area. They're currently working on that one. There's some back and forth that needs to occur in terms of getting those sweeps completed. The foundation needed some work. The foundation that the poles sit on needed some work. That you got to fix the sweeps, then fix the foundation, then finish off the sweeps and finish everything else in terms of grading. There's also a temporary anchor block that's there that needed to be coordinated too. So they're continuing to work that, hoping that all that repair work will be completed in the next, say, 3 weeks or so. And that's all ongoing. In terms of the 138, We talked early on about replacement cable being delivered. All of that replacement cable is on island ahead of what we anticipated, so that's good news. Now it's just working through the final acceptance, or pre-final acceptance as it's called with HECO, for the infrastructure so that we can begin pulling cable. A lot of the packages for that pre-final acceptance is being put together. If I remember correctly, one of the packages went through. So basically all the inspection records for all the conduits and infrastructure needs to be sent to HECO for their review before we get the green light to do the final mandrel of the conduits and then cable pulling. Moving on to CCGS, we have 26 shafts completed, and that's between Dillingham and Nimitz area. We are discussing with Tudor, the CCGS contractor, on a third setup for shaft drilling. They're looking at, they haven't finalized this yet, so they're looking at the east end of Dillingham to start that work, and then the two would meet in the middle of Dillingham. But they're still waiting to get that finalized, and then they'll mobilize to start that. We have 12 columns completed at various locations in Nimitz and Dillingham, and that will continue following the shaft work. In the next couple of weeks, we'll begin to see mobilization for the capitals. So that's the part that sits on top of the column, which will then support the guideway structure. I think they're going to mobilize. It's a big form that needs to be delivered from out in the storage yard to site. They're going to do it on the Nimitz area at one of the first columns that was constructed. So be on the lookout for that. You'll see that first capital come up. Exciting for us in terms of progress. Station work, they continue with station foundation piles at Kapalama Station. Ivaley Station, they continue with site prep, basically soil stabilization before they start the foundation piles at Ivaley. Downtown station work will begin shortly. We did get our access there. One of the first things that the contractor is going to do is put up some fence to kind of section off their work area. They have to do some investigative work for the adjacent buildings. So please be on the lookout for that. You may have to reroute some of your walking paths in that area to get to the buildings adjacent. So that's upcoming here shortly. Civic Center Station, if you've been in that area recently, we've put up some of the fence similar to what I mentioned about downtown, kind of sectioning off our work area for site prep for the station work. We'll begin removing some of that building in that area, doing some soil preparation, and then follow on will be some of the station work. So a lot of station work occurring here shortly at majority of the stations, and some may impact some of your commutes, so be on the lookout for that, especially the downtown station. MOT plans, the maintenance of traffic plans for Dillingham. We're expecting to have that fully approved from all the stakeholders here shortly. And this is to continue the maintenance of traffic from that east end on Dillingham further. So concrete barriers soon to go up, I'd say in the next couple of weeks on Dillingham. You won't be able to make those illegal left-hand turns anymore. There won't be cones. There'll be hard concrete barriers put up shortly. And they'll move in that west to east direction on Dillingham. Same goes, I don't want to say same goes for Halakawila, but Halakawila maintenance of traffic plans, that's still being coordinated between the contractor and all the stakeholders in our team to make sure all the comments and issues and concerns are addressed. But just wanted to throw that out there. In the next few months, we can expect those plans to be approved and then eventually implemented on Halakawila. We did talk through in the community meeting, and I think Lori's going to give an update on that. But just wanted to give you a high level of what's going on in Halakawila because it's very tight corridor. There'll be disruptive work there. Right now we're doing, as I mentioned, Civic Center Station site prep work for the station construction. We're also doing potholing, so investigative work at the column locations to ensure there's no obstructions, utilities, whatever it may be, before they actually start drilling the shafts on Halakawila. The next thing will be tree trimming. So we work through with the outdoor circle in terms of trees, and there may be a couple of trees that need to be removed or repurposed, but majority of the trees will be trimmed back to make way for that construction. And then following that, you'll see similar work in terms of shaft construction, column construction, capital construction. It will require some maintenance of traffic that may block some areas off, but we're working, as we discussed in the community meeting, with the businesses in the community, making sure everybody's aware, making sure that the businesses can express their concerns and make sure we can work with them in terms of that. So that's soon to be coming in the next few months. I know it's not, soon, but it's very soon in terms of the major work that's upcoming. West Side projects, so there's a few West Side projects that we still need to complete. Waipahu Makai entrance, we put that procurement out recently, so that's on the street. So if any contractors are online, please go pull those plans and the procurement documents and submit your bids. Park and rides, we are continue to coordinate with stakeholders to ensure the location and how the parking lot's configured meets their requirements, especially DTS in terms of how that's going to operate with their bus transit area. And then we are beginning preliminary designs on those parking lots, still pushing to get those designs ready for procurement towards the end of the year. Pearl Highlands Ramp and Transit Center, we continue to coordinate with stakeholders, meeting with HDOT, Ed and his team, looking at an alternative to that big ramp flyover. So we continue to work through some of the details on the technical side to make sure it's feasible and we can build it that way rather than the big flyover ramp. Also working with DTS to ensure their buses can meet those requirements and come into that transit center at the Pearl Highlands station. I did want to highlight one item. If you can go to page 37, Ryan, and this is in regards to schedule and float. And I'm going to turn it over to Lori first.
So board members, we wanted to bring this to your attention sooner rather than later, and just to be open, honest, and transparent. But just understand, this is a schedule that is still 5 years out. So I'm not going to get into the details, as Corey and Vance will get into that. But when you look at the graphic, it's pretty shocking. Historic, page 37. So historically, both on the schedule and the finances, if you look at the blue line, hard actual, and the recovery line is the black line. Historically, we've been way above on both, again, the schedule and the finances. This has dropped significantly within the last quarter. And so I just want to preface that we don't have all of the information. This is based on, we just finalized the schedule, the baseline schedule with Tutor. And based on that, this is our projections that right now, this is our no float schedule. And you folks understand how construction is with no float. That means everything has to be perfect, no glitches, and to meet our revenue service date of 2031. Right now, if you look at our schedule, we still are on to meet that 2031, but again, that's with no float. So Kika did remind me that if there has to be a change in revenue service date, we do need board approval for that, and also working with FTA. This is still 5 years out. We still have a chance to work with Hitachi. One of the agenda items is also going to be a change order with Hitachi. We finally came to an agreement with them on a settlement of what the cost would be for them because the project is delayed. We still don't have their schedule. So we've made assumptions of how long we think they will take. And so if you just, like I said, for now, our schedule still shows 2031, but no float. So we do have some opportunities to bring that schedule back in line once we get Hitachi's, and working with both Hitachi and Tutor to see if there's any way we can bring that schedule back. And with that, I'll let Vance and Corey go into the details, and then we can answer any questions you folks may have.
Thanks, Lori. So yeah, like Lori said, I mean, clearly the schedule is coming concerning, and over the past several months, we've talked about some of these issues. This is dealing with utility access issues for CCGS. This is also dealing with working with on the baseline schedule. One of the big sticking points we had was how soon can we turn over infrastructure to core systems in the back end? And that's going to be the driver, ultimately, of our operational readiness date. And so we're comparing our 2022 recovery plan schedule to this schedule. And And since 2022, a lot of things have shifted, a lot of things have moved. We procured CCGS slightly later. So a lot of things have contributed to the fact that we are now looking at 100 days afloat for the remainder of the project. So like Lori said, we are working with FTA and PMOC. They've been reviewing all of our documents, and they want to also just validate where do we see this schedule going. And so we continue to hold March 2031. We'll hear from FTA and PMOC probably over the next month or two on how they feel about holding that date. But for now, we just wanted to make sure it was upfront on where we are with our schedule.
That's the end of the monthly report update. Open for question.
Great. Thank you for the update. Any questions from the board members online or in person?
Under the schedule, pardon me. I'm curious, under the schedule, when would you envision that we would see trains operating on the guideway in a test mode? Is that a year before 31?
About a year and a half or so, yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions? Anybody online? Natalie? Oh,
So, if we do end up moving the revenue service date, what kind of impact, if any, would there be an impact to the EAC?
So right now, we don't see any impacts to things. Thanks for the question, Keegan. Yeah, right now, we do not see an impact to the EAC. We believe we can absorb some schedule slip and still within our same costs. That's also one of the items that we're working with FTA to kind of confirm, but our risk model and everything is saying we're still okay to hold our costs.
Okay. And then on the sweeps, I know that we were kind of estimating initially that we were expecting the cables a little further down the road and whatnot. So some of the slippage because of the sweeps, have we made up some of that time, or how is that working out?
So initially, it appeared like the long lead items was going to be the driver of getting the sweeps completed. Now we have all the materials in. Right now, it's the infrastructure turnover that's still holding us up. So we haven't bought quite any time yet. I think part of the when we negotiated and came to an agreement with the baseline schedule, Tutor did accept some of our delayed access dates in the baseline schedule, which means we de-risked a lot of that. There's still a portion of Dillingham that's kind of east of Waikimilo that we still need to turn over, and that sweep repair is dependent on that. So we're still waiting to get infrastructure approved. Once that's done, we get the cable and poles down, then we can turn over everything in Dillingham, and that really clears up part of our critical path.
So I guess some of the, I'm assuming that some of the work that we can do in preparation for the actual pulling, like I think you mentioned the test prep and all that stuff, that's all kind of going on concurrently, so that we're doing as much as we can, I guess, while we're waiting for the infrastructure.
Yeah, we're working on as much non-critical work as we can get done.
Okay.
While we work and getting our critical path done.
Just curious, the long lead on the cable, what was the, how did it come in sooner than we anticipated? Was there a?
Well, what was told to us that the manufacturer was procuring a similar cable, and we were able to get in line to that. Normally, the setup for the type of cable that you're ordering isn't always available. They have to the manufacturer has to set everything up in the shop and then manufacture the cable. So we were fortunate that they were already manufacturing very similar cable.
Was it just a coincidence, or was it what?
I think it was a coincidence.
Okay, all right.
And I think we wanted to make sure we had a conservative estimate.
Yep.
As well.
Okay.
We didn't want to overproduce.
Okay, thanks, Chair.
Any other questions?
Chair? For me? What about Tutor Perini? Are they performing at the speed we would like? And if not, what can we do to light a fire under them?
Yeah, so their shaft production is going slower than they had anticipated. And it is part of this driver. To their credit, they are aware of that and they're acknowledging it. And they brought in, like Vance said, a third rig is going to be starting soon. They're even talking about a fourth set of equipment crew to start on Halakwila. So
So they would have 4 drilling rigs operating at the same time?
They're gonna-
And originally, they had 2? So you've
three
persuaded
was
them?
always anticipated. The fourth one is kind of the newer one. The third one is going to try to help them pick up some schedule. It's kind of where they're placing them now. They've been a little slower on Dillingham than they thought, so they're going to add one to Dillingham and a fourth one to help with downtown.
So could the 4th rig help recover some of the setback in the schedule?
It certainly could mitigate any further slippage, potentially, but there's still some other items, like getting stations up has always typically been our driver. And so
Right.
the fact that they're starting those stations early has been a good thing. That's going to help. So yeah, there's resources that can be added to kind of help improve the schedule. And then the other opportunity that we have is working with HRH and seeing if we can get resources on their side to also help speed up like installation, testing, and commissioning to get us to operational readiness.
And HRH, Hitachi, despite the Pilikia in the past, they're cooperating, they're showing interest in accelerating what they're doing to try and catch up a bit on the schedule?
Yeah, in initial discussions about future installation, testing, commissioning, as Corey mentioned, they're interested in, how they can help in terms of the overall schedule and duration. They obviously segment 2 went a lot quicker than we anticipated. They were able to get all of their work in terms of installation, the initial testing completed, obviously the trial run and the safety certification that that requires a certain amount of time, the 30 days, and safety certification is something you can't rush. But on the front end installation, that initial testing, they're willing to work with us to see how they can mitigate some of that, taking lessons learned that they did in segment 1 and segment 2 and applying it to segment 3.
I just want to add, just to clarify, so Tudor Perini, so their initial production rate, let's say in their bid, I'm just pulling a number out of the air, maybe it was supposed to be 5 shafts per, 5 days per shaft, thank you, 5 days per shaft. They're at about 9 to 10 right now, and it's not because they're dragging their feet or anything. They are running into problems out there in the field. The material that they're digging into, for example, on Nimitz and Dillingham, their casing got stuck. So they had to, at least on Dillingham, they were able to remove it. Nimitz, they couldn't. So they're running into construction issues out there, and some of the opportunities that I was mentioning is stuff like that. Can you bring in extra rigs? Can you work 24/7? You need approvals for that, sound and noise and vibration issues. But going to Hitachi, there's no incentive for them to drag their feet, because really it's Rogers part of the contract where they make money. We're Manini,
Right.
so it's to their benefit, and they want to move quicker. And when Mayor makes announcements like, "Oh, we're going to open," they really try to meet that schedule. So we're hoping, like I said, we're just getting that change order hopefully approved by you folks. Once we can get the schedule from them, our team is really good about, you don't need 6 months to do that. You can do it in 3 months, but they're kind of like us, where you don't want to overpromise, right? You want to give yourself cushion to make that deadline, but just know we're working with them.
Yeah. But so they don't have any particular financial interest in the installation. They're going to make all of their money once we go into service. And so for that reason, they want to get it done as soon as possible.
Motivation for that, yes.
And I assume having you on their tail is a bit of a motivation as well. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you. Any other questions on the progress report? Seeing none, we'll move to the next item, the, oops, sorry, John.
Quick.
Sorry.
So I appreciate the discussion. Are there any other opportunities that you folks haven't talked about yet to improve schedule?
Think there are. I think we need to go back and probably brainstorm with the team and the contractor to see on the tutor end. Obviously, as Corey mentioned, station work has always been the long lead item for, segment 1, segment 2. So if there's opportunity there, we can discuss with tutor to get access to Hitachi earlier rather than later. Is there opportunity to have Hitachi start some of their cable pulling or testing earlier, things like that, that we still need to explore, can explore with the contractor, but nothing that we've really been discussing at this point.
So more globally, there's maybe two big opportunities. It's Tutor and it's Hitachi, trying to squish their schedules. So as Vance was mentioning, there's opportunities within those two big ones. Can we get Hitachi in sooner? Don't wait until all the infrastructure is there. Can you start already getting into the stations? There's going to be inefficiencies that will get a claim from the contractors, I'm sure, but in the grand scheme of things, it's still a cost savings for us. So there's sub opportunities within those two big ones. That's really all we have is Tutor and Hitachi squishing their schedules. How we do that, it's usually more manpower, more hours.
Sorry for pointing out the obvious, but let us know as board how we can help do that, because ultimately that's the end game. And sorry, one more thing. So the schedule, as alarming as it looks, I'm trying to figure out, like, the schedule is really looking in the rearview mirror, right? It's stuff that's already happened. It doesn't look forward. So this discussion on the sweeps, the 138 kV issue, the fact that we were able to receive delivery of the material about a month earlier actually improves our chances of not losing more schedule. So I especially concerned how the schedule could have looked if the material came in when we expected it, which is a month out. So we could have had we might be having more slippage of schedule. And the early delivery obviously helps, but just kind of preparing myself for the next quarter, which, I don't want to jinx us, but, it's trending the wrong way. And I think that's important for all of us to remember. Thanks.
Sure. Thanks, John. Oh, Patrick? Yeah.
Do you know what the workforce is now for Tutor? I know you get a monthly report on that, but is it,
Not off the top of our head.
is it in a 300 range or something on that range?
I don't know. We can find out.
I know they report it, so,
Because even with the Tutor, they have their subs
Yeah.
too, so it's,
yeah.
you're looking globally, everything, the whole Tutor team, what they're,
And I guess the related question is, and probably we don't know this either, but does Tutor, everybody has a hard time recruiting for labor. And I'm just wondering really if the difficulty of recruitment impacts Tutor at all, that they wish they had more, but they're having a hard time recruiting?
It doesn't sound like it in terms of like the laborers, the specialty laborers. We've sat in meetings. We go to a quarterly meeting with them, with the union, and they talk about work that's ongoing, work that's upcoming, and the union's very accommodating in terms of helping out to bring in those, whether it's concrete, rebar, steel, whatever it may be. And we haven't heard anything in terms of shortage on that. Now maybe the very specialty labor, like the guys that know shaft drilling and can work that machinery, they probably bring in. But other than that, we haven't heard any shortage of labor at this point in time.
Good. Anybody else? No? Okay, let's move on to the PMOC report, May 2026.
Ryan, can you go to page 5? Now highlight a lot of the items that they've noted here in terms of major issues and or concerns we're going to talk to already. Maybe the first item we can go into detail, but it's just item that's been carried here for quite some time in terms of the Hitachi claim. We don't have any update that's going through the process, as we mentioned previously. The next two items, the first one is the CCR 4 and 4E schedule, which we kind of talked through. Just PMLC's concern about, you know, the 138 and how that impacts the overall schedule. And then the one after that is the CCGS schedule, so noting that the recent baseline schedule was conditionally accepted, and that how that impacted, as we just talked about, in terms of the drawdown on the contingency in terms of schedule flow. PMLC, as Corey mentioned, you know, we've been having meetings with them, providing details in terms of our schedule, what was approved, all the other, you know, contractor schedule, CCR 4, 4E, our master project schedule, our risk and our recent risk refresh. All that information has been provided to PMLC. They asked questions, we provided responses, nothing out of the ordinary, just clarification questions, and as Corey mentioned, expected in the next couple of months, their feedback in terms of their review. So nothing to really report there other than what we just discussed. And then the last one is core system segment 3 design delay. And this is the input that's needed from the core systems contractor in terms of their design that incorporates into the CCGS or the tutor design. We continue to mitigate that by providing the information to tutors so that they can move forward with their designs. And we have the upcoming presentation on the change order for the core systems contractor in terms of design, procurement, manufacturing that we'll present. But with the information that they have, that they've already done, they've been providing to tutor, all the missing information or where they could not provide definitive answers, our team has been providing to tutor to move their designs forward. So that's just PMLC noting their concerns about that. That's the last item.
Okay. Members, any questions on the PMLC? Seeing none, all right, we'll move on to the next item, which is the Station Design Workshop Summary.
All right. Some good news. So I think last time we mentioned the CCGS, City Center Gathering Station neighborhood design workshops were completed. I just wanted to give you a brief summary on how that went, and really positive feedback from the community. If you can go to the next slide. You see some photos there. You know, it varied in terms of turnout, depending on the station. You know, there's very high interest in the Chinatown station. Some of the other stations may not have as much interest, but we did get people from the community come in and hear our presentation and provide feedback. Next slide. So we did have 2 workshops per station for all 6 stations. We had over total 200 people attend throughout the entire time for the workshops. And then we had about 300 votes in terms of the design enhancements and some of the things that were proposed for the stations. And we received over 200 comments, whether it was in person, you know, sticky notes. We had sticky notes in these boards, and each board was specific to whether it's landscaping or the architecture of the station, and people were able to provide feedback. You know, I want the station to be colored red or, you know, purple or whatever it may be, what type of plans. A lot of positive comments, a lot of positive feedback, and we appreciate the community's participation in terms of that. Next slide. So the first round of workshops, you know, was for us to present the 30% design to the community. You know, here's what the station could potentially look like. Here's some of the things that we're thinking of in terms of architecture, some of the architectural features, screening, painting, colors, landscaping, things like that, and wanted their feedback as to what they want to see. A lot of them, you know, use the system on the west side and ride the skyline, and had some, you know, comments in terms of what could be done better. You know, some of the landscaping, shaded areas, seating, things like that. Various comments and concerns that were brought up, and some new things that were also brought up. But they also had the opportunity to talk directly to the designers, so the Parsons team, who's a tutor that's doing the design for the station, ask questions about why did you design it this way? What was your thoughts in terms of the roof lines or the landscaping, and get into the details and the nitty-gritty that you may not be able to have, in a large discussion or presentation. So it gives them the intimate one-on-ones with the designers themselves. Next slide. And then the second round, we took all of that feedback, all of the comments, and implemented them into the stations where we could in terms of landscaping, architecture, color, things like that. And then presented them some options in terms of what could be implemented. So some of the stations, being next to historical sites, require some mitigation. So some of those mitigations were presented. Chinatown being one of the most visual ones and most one that was the community was concerned about. So making sure that fits into that community in that area, not to take away from the surrounding buildings and Chinatown itself. So the community was able to vote on some of the architectural features. I think if you go to the next slide, we may have some pictures of that. There we go. So you can see, we have the fencing and architectural fence around the station to add, to some of that, or some of the brick walls, adding some color to that or whatever it may be. Taking all of that in and having the community vote on what they'd like to see the most. And it's a good turnout. We got a lot of votes in terms of what people want to see. And just some examples shown there. The other thing, bottom right corner, that's just an example of a curation for artifacts that can be at the station, and working with John and Roger, DTS, to place these artifacts and making sure that they're upkept and kept in shape because they're artifacts. So some of those things being implemented at the stations, but overall positive feedback from the community. We appreciate all the community's input and participating in the process. Just wanted to give you folks that summary.
Thanks, Vance. Any questions of the board members? John?
Makes sense. So I understand the intent of these design workshops are to determine more aesthetics, right? Give the public an opportunity to share their opinion on how it should look, but not necessarily how it should be designed. The core design part is not on the table for discussion. Has the workshop resulted in any design changes based on input received at all?
In terms of the overall structural of the station?
Right, or we keep hearing about concern with stairs and the need for escalators or need for a second elevator, for example. Has any of those concerns fundamentally changed the design of a station?
No, that wasn't the intent of those discussions. I mean, a lot of the structural stairwells, elevators, things of that nature has already been determined. It's more the aesthetics, but none of those comments or concerns had changed any of those configurations.
Anthony?
Yeah, I attended a number of these workshops. I saw John at several as well. I was surprised that there wasn't any hostility. I didn't encounter any hostility. They were by and large very supportive. So I think it was a worthwhile exercise.
Kathy?
I didn't go to the last workshops, but the ones I did attend, they're really nice designs. And my concern was, is there within the design budget? Because it seemed like there's a lot of really nice touches from an architectural standpoint, but can we afford it? Or is some of that stuff going to go away to linoleum, in cost engineering phase?
Yeah, a lot of it's being evaluated, taking in the comments and the voting from the public, not And we've made this clear, not everything's going to be implemented at the stations. Some stations had 5 options for some of the treatment, and maybe 2 out of the 5 will be implemented. We do have the concerns on cost and budget, so keeping that in mind. We're also working with the contractor, the designer, to see if there's alternatives. Let's say there was something that was, that should be implemented because it adds to the feature of the station, the community. Is there alternatives for the type of material or what's, how everything's going to be coated, or is there alternatives to the concrete or whatever it may be? We're trying to work with the contractor to see if there's ways we can implement at a lower cost if it is expensive. But all of that is being considered before it's fully implemented.
Well, thank you. So I assume that there's close relationship between the final design and DTS or whoever else in the city's maintaining it, so the issues of maintenance concerns can be addressed now.
Yes, you've shared those designs with Roger and his team to get any input in terms of, I would take the architectural fence, for example. There were some options thrown on the table where it was very intricate in how the fence was woven together, which makes it a nightmare to clean. So, there was other options presented, and getting DTS's input on that, and implementing it into the final design is what we're doing.
Thank you.
There were a lot of lessons learned, I think, in segment 1. Corrosion was a big issue for some of the station features. You had mentioned earlier at the workshop that some of the comments where they weren't totally happy with the landscaping at some of them. Was that the upkeep of the landscaping or the type of landscaping?
Some of the upkeep, and then some of the stations don't have enough trees for shading. I think those are the 2 common comments.
Okay. I'll get my team to take a look at the upkeep part.
I think.
Are we allowed to use any of the arts budget to pay for some of these architectural features that have come out of the design workshops? How much flexibility is there in the arts budget?
I don't know if there's any hard budget left. We can take a look. We'll check on that.
I mean, it's a fixed percentage of the total construction cost, so...
And we've met our requirement. There's other features like the architectural columns that are being implemented, so we feel we've met the requirements, but we'll take a look.
But just to clarify, when you say art budget, it's all still part of our EAC, so you're just moving money from here to here, so.
We do have.
It's not like we're getting money from the city to.
Since it's a fixed percentage within our budget, we don't have any option but to spend it on art now. So I was just wondering if some of that could, for example, the architectural fence, would that qualify? Could that be paid for out of the art budget?
We'll take a look. We do also have provisions for future art. Some things we've talked through with Roger and John about is opportunities to partner with adjacent communities for displaying art, local art. So there are provisions for future art at a lot of the stations.
Any other questions? Anybody online? Just a point of clarification. So your first 2 workshops per station, right? So first workshop, you kind of get here's what we're going to do, get their feedback, and then second workshop, take what they said, and this is what we kind of do. So after the second workshop, what is the feel from the community? Do you feel like their input has been validated, or?
Yeah, with, the feedback that we got, I think a lot of them were appreciative to see some of their comments being implemented, whether it was landscaping or color or some of the architectural features. And they had a lot of opportunity to vote, so not to get into nitty gritty, but we gave them like these little sticky circles, and we had them placed on boards. One station had 5 options, and you take a look at those boards. I don't know if there's a picture of it, Ryan. If you go back a couple, you can see all those stickies on that board. Yep. And you can see how many people voted, and Some of them were, very passionate as to, they had 5 stickies per person and they put all 5 on one option. They wanted that, implemented. So I think it was very positive feedback and they were excited.
Thanks, Vance. Any other questions? Thank you for that. Okay, we'll move on to the next item. Let's see, the core systems contract change order for segment 3.
All right, I think the board members have the presentation in front of them. So this is a request for approval on a contract change order, which we are numbering 85 for the core systems contractor, totaling $53 million to compensate the core systems contractor for impacts that are attributed to schedule extension and owner-directed scope modifications for segment 3 that were not contemplated under the original contract. The current contract value is $1.726 billion, and this is all inclusive with the O&M side. With the change, it would go to $1.779 billion. I'm going to go through a little background and history on the contract, and then go into the details of the change order. So the original contract was signed back in 2011 with, at that time, Ansaldo Honolulu Joint Venture, which is now Hitachi Rail Honolulu Joint Venture, for the design, build, operate, maintain services for the core system scope. And this included from East Kapolei all the way to Ala Moana, so the entire original scope of the project. Just highlighting some major milestones and dates here. In 2019, change order 52 was executed and issued to Hitachi for extending the completion date for full opening. The original date for the original contract was back in 2020. Obviously, that's no longer the case. There was a small change order that pushed it out just a little bit, and then CCO 52, which was the largest change order, that pushed that end date all the way to end of 2024. So essentially January 1st, 2025 is when revenue service to Ala Moana would have occurred. We were going through the last segment 3 procurement in 2021. Because of the delay and where we were in terms of overall project schedule, stop work order was issued to Hitachi to suspend all segment 3 work so that we wouldn't incur costs on segment 3. At that time, they were still working on segment 1 and segment 2, so there's a lot of work ongoing, not necessarily related to segment 3. So we paused all that segment 3 work. And then in 2022, as we're all aware, the recovery plan and full funding grant agreement was amended, which truncated the scope to about 19 miles, 19 stations with the temporary interim terminus at Civic Center Station. Then we went through the procurement for CCGS, and in 2024, we signed a contract with Tudor to build all the way to Civic Center. And at the end of 2024, we lifted the stop work order for Hitachi for the subsystem design and interface activities. So all the activities needed to do interface with Tudor to progress designs for Tudor. Then earlier this year in March, the board approved change order 84, which gave Hitachi an extension of time from October 2025 to the end of 2025. In that time period, basically they finished segment 2, and that was the extension of time from segment 2 on. And that was roughly $3 million to Hitachi, and remobilization, effort cost, storage costs, and the extension of time. And so this change order specifically for a few things. The first one is design changes. So Hitachi the contract was signed back in 2011 for the original alignment from East Kapolei to Ala Moana. Since then, there's been modifications. Obviously, the Maka shift on Dillingham. That change hasn't been issued to Hitachi, and the idea there was to wait till we had CCGS or the segment 3 contractor on board before we make any modifications in case there would be any other changes that would need to be done. So, for example, Hitachi needs to update their automatic train control design. They completed the automatic train control design from East Kapolei to Ala Moana, based on the original alignment and the original project scope. So that design has been long been completed. They actually manufactured, procured a lot of the train control equipment all the way to Ala Moana, and all that equipment is sitting in storage. So they'll have to do some modifications, obviously, to the interim temporary terminus at Civic Center. The trains will have to go to Civic Center, turn back, and go back the other way. That was not part of the original design. There may be additional equipment that needs to be procured for that design, based on the train control and how that all will be determined after they do their evaluation. The traction electrification system, obviously with the truncated line, we have one less traction power substation, so they'll need to update their load calculations and do verification to their design. The communications network, they'll need to modify and change. Fire detection and activation system, they'll have to modify. And some of the general system changes, such as the O&M documents and O&M procedures. Obviously, you're no longer going to Ala Moana. There's some modification to those procedures that need to be done. And then Civic Center TPSS, traction power substation. Right now, in the scope for Hitachi, that traction power substation was to be built into a building, so within the station. Since then, there is no requirement to do so, to keep things consistent with the west side, for ease of future operations and maintenance to match what's on the west side. We're going to go back to the prefabricated TPSS, so very similar building that will be prefabricated and then delivered and dropped on site. So that's a design change for Hitachi. The next portion of the change order is to compensate Hitachi for the extension of time. Obviously, they were supposed to be done at the end of 2025, or at the end of 2024 with revenue service of 2025. That earlier change order this year extended their contract to the end of 2025, and then now this change order will extend their contract to April 2029. And this is just for design, procurement, manufacturing activities. So this includes, project interface management, ongoing operation expenses. They're also doing an obsolescence study. So because time has gone for so long, a lot of the equipment and material that was installed on segment 1 and segment 2 was designed a long time ago. And we need to verify whether or not that equipment will be compatible with equipment that's available on the market today. Some of that equipment, on segment 1 and segment 2 may be at end of life, whether it's, they don't make that equipment anymore, or there's no support for future maintenance. So Hitachi is doing an obsolescence study to determine what needs to be done. We're working with Hitachi to mitigate that as much as possible, whether there's options rather than replacing things. Is there, compatible equipment or compatible software that could be implemented on segment 3 to work with segment 1? So that obsolescence study is part of this work as well. And then obviously, a lot of the equipment and installation was to be done back, design was to be done, back in 2022, 23 timeframe for ready for service end of 24, early 25. Escalation from then until now, or when the work will be occurring. So price escalation from the original contract to when they will actually be doing the work. And then this also includes all of their subcontractor claims due to the delay, right? Their subcontractors, for example, the platform screen gates, that subcontractor obviously delayed from when they were originally till when they are expected to be completed. So it compensates all of the design, procurement, manufacturing effort. Just want to make it clear, and I said it again, design, procurement, manufacturing activities. This doesn't include the installation, testing, commissioning. And the reason for that, initially, we did not have the approved baseline schedule for CCGS. And in order for us to have a change order for the installation, testing, commissioning portion for Hitachi, we'd have to provide access dates and when the stations would be done, when the guideway would be done. We did not have those dates, so the plan was to to disconnect those to issue this change order. Now that we have the CCGS schedule, as Corey mentioned, we still need to fold in the Hitachi portion. So we'll have a subsequent change order for the extension of time, escalation for the installation, testing, installation and testing and commissioning portion of Hitachi work. So this is just design, procurement, manufacturing. There's still another change order for installation, testing, commissioning. Just want to make that clear. So just highlighting again some of the major executed change orders. CCO 33 was, as I mentioned early on, a small change order for some of the dates moving out from the original contract date. And then change order 52, which was the largest one, that was $160 million, which pushed their contract duration out to the end of 2024, as I mentioned. And then the recent change order 84, which was for the end of 2025, extension of time. So we've gone through all the processes and procedures internally to heart. The change has been determined to have merit. We evaluated for cost, contractual entitlement, and cost reasonableness. The funding will come from allocated project contingency. Obviously, if this change order is not approved, it will result in a claim because Hitachi will need to continue work. They will need to claim for the damages that they have. And again, this is a request for approval for this change order, $53 million to the core systems contractor. Open for questions. And just to highlight, this isn't executed. Obviously, we need the board's approval. So a lot of the details, if there are any questions, we would prefer to do an executive session if there is anything in terms of details.
I appreciate the putting this together for us, the history as well as the purpose. And of course, having the Hitachi executive show up a few months ago, they want to continue to move forward with us. So I think it's important for us, committee members as well as board members, to keep that in mind. But with that being said, we want to make sure that the money that we're taking from the contingency is fair and reasonable on our side too, right? So with that said, open up for any questions.
I have some questions, but I think I'd rather do it in executive session.
Okay. Any other? Yeah.
I have a general question. So Vance, help me understand the segment 3 alignment changes. So that is a Malka shift of the track, right? And I think there's significant design effort related to an alignment shift, specifically related to the train control equipment. And I think the train control equipment is important because it's a driverless train. Is the understanding correct? Okay. My general question is, I think in the past, we as a board have talked about HRH not having started design of certain things, and I don't know exactly what. I think could be related to this. If HRH has not started design or is far behind schedule on the design, is this design request change right now something that they didn't do versus that they did and they need to redesign it?
It's a combination of both.
Okay.
So, for example, you mentioned the train control. They did do the train control design early on, and they just have to modify based on that Malka shift.
Okay.
The comms design, for example, they did an initial, full alignment design in terms of the comm network, but individual station of where cameras and speakers are going to go, that hasn't been done.
Okay. Okay, so I guess my overall question, and this is an obvious thing, but let's not pay them for changes that they didn't even do the original design yet. So I don't know how you reconcile that, but that would be, my concern. Just make sure that we're not paying them for changes for something that they didn't already design.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions?
I guess I've got one general one, which shouldn't be in the executive session. Is any of the work that they've done up until now for the segment beyond Civic Center, can any of that be repurposed when we build the extension to Ala Moana, or is it all wasted work and we can't recover any of that?
It can be used, yes, especially the train control, because it's, yes, sure, that's it.
So there'll be a little bit of a saving for that segment to Ala Moana.
Any
I guess
further-
I'm the only board member. I'd like to move that we go into executive session.
Thank you, Anthony. Need a second? Second. We'll move into executive session at this time.
Just give me a minute to clear the room, please.
All everyone, for your time. We are now back into general session for the Project Oversight Committee meeting. We just came out of executive session and did have a chance to consult with our attorneys and HART staff related to item number 6, the core systems contract change order for segment 3. In short, there was a discussion on making sure that we are not duplicating any efforts with city staff in relation to any operation and maintenance issues, as well as. You're not along?
I'm sorry, I'm
Start again.
Good rehearsal.
10, 9.
sorry about that.
Okay. You ready?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. We are now back into the Project Oversight Committee meeting. We just got out of executive session. We did consult with our attorneys and with HART staff related to item number 6, the core systems contract change order for segment 3. In short, there was discussion on making sure that we are not duplicating any efforts with city staff related to the operations and maintenance. And then also we had discussions on the negotiations with Hitachi. So with that said, back to the agenda item.
Chair, if I could just clarify one thing. This change order has absolutely nothing to do with the litigation that is ongoing with Hitachi. That litigation covers historical segments 1 and 2, so this change order is
Correct.
pertaining to
Correct.
moving forward,
Completely separate,
segment 3. Thank you.
Okay, with that said, we do need this is an action item for item 6 for the core system contract change order segment 3. So any further discussion on this by board members? If none, I need a motion
Chair,
from the
I
PLC committee.
would like to make a motion that we recommend to the full board that it approves this core systems change order.
Anthony?
Second.
We move in seconded. Therefore, it is been adopted and we'll move to the full
Can I vote,
board
Chair?
agenda following this.
Did you take a vote? Please take a vote on the motion.
Got to call for the motion.
You take a vote.
We did. That's just the three of us, right? So the motion has been approved.
Okay.
Okay. Moving on to item number 7, the eminent domain, resolution 2026-12. This is the notifying of the city council of the intention to acquire by eminent domain portion of the fee simple property that is located at 617 Dillingham, owned by HECO.
Thank you.
Kirsten?
This is a request to notify the City Council of Hart's intent to acquire property by eminent domain. This is related to 617 Dillingham Boulevard, owned by Hawaiian Electric Company. Next slide, please. This is a Google map of the Evile Station site. This is where Hart will be building the Evile Station. It's the HECO Evile substation currently. Next page, please. This is a map of, this is actually a current litigation. We had in 2018 filed Hart filed litigation, I'm sorry, is it 2018? Yes. A lawsuit, a condemnation lawsuit against HECO for property interests needed for the rail. They were predominantly for easements for the station and for the guideway, some temporary easements and some fee simple interest easements. The original filing is shown on this map, and I'll explain a little bit more in a minute, but if we turn to page 2, what we're doing is, next slide, please. Oh, I'm sorry, back up one. Slide number 4, please. Yes, thank you. If you'll see here, some of those property interests have been eliminated, but also what you'll see, the biggest change is a lot of the easement area has turned into fee simple interest, which is considered a greater property right. And because we are condemning a greater right, we need to have the board approval again for that same condemnation for us to make that change. So that's just a very broad overview. I'm going to give some additional details here on the next page. Next slide, please. As a public utility company, HECO is unable to convey property rights without approval from the Public Utility Commission, PUC, which is lengthy and a complicated process. To ensure that Hart was able to meet its project schedule, it was previously decided that Hart would pursue necessary property for the project through a condemnation action. Hart filed a condemnation action in 2018 for acquisition of certain easement rights. That was filed in November of 2018. Due to the Mauka shift, the land area from HECO was slightly reduced. You saw from slide number 1 to slide number 2 that the areas along Dillingham were no longer necessary. Additionally, HECO had requested that the property for station purposes found in the original complaint be acquired in fee simple interest rather than as a permanent easement. Hart determined that fee simple interest in the station parcel is in its best interest and agreed to the change in property rights. The parties will cooperate to file an amended complaint to incorporate the changes. The amount of just compensation for the property has been determined according to the URA. Hart provided a revised written offer of just compensation for the property in June of 2026. Next slide, please. Yeah, so the eminent domain approval process, under Hart's eminent domain approval process, whenever there are changes to property interests within a condemnation action that result in a greater land area or greater rights, it's necessary to go through the board approval process before making the change. Upon approval of this resolution, Hart will inform the City Council of its intent to acquire the property by eminent domain. The council will have 45 days to approve or object to that. And then upon approval or no action by the City Council, the Board of Directors will be requested to approve a resolution authorizing the change in the condemnation action. Hart and HECO will work cooperatively throughout the condemnation process. So this is being done mainly because of HECO's, the condemnation itself is being done mainly because of HECO's restrictions and how they convey title, not because the parties cannot come to an agreement. And I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Kirsten. Questions, board members? No questions? So just one, how's the negotiations with HECO?
They're good. You know, there's been a lot of cooperation as far as getting Hart the access that it needs, the rights that it needs to do the construction. They've even allowed Hart to work outside of the area where we're going to have permanent rights. They've given us use of mainly the whole base yard, which has been a very good thing for the project. As part of the condemnation, the valuation issues will be solved. We haven't had much discussion about that yet because we've kind of been working on just the cooperation of using their two sites, both here and in downtown. It's been very cooperative, in my opinion. We've got a representative from HECO here today showing their support. The parties are working well together.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yeah, just to reiterate, so this is the first step of us to notification to the city council, goes to city council, and then they act upon it and come back to us.
That's right. City council will decide whether or not they want to take up a resolution or if they just want the 45 days to lapse. For the last few years, they have just been letting the days lapse. And then we would come back for actual approval to make that amendment or change to the condemnation. It's not a new action, it's a change to the existing action.
Thank you. Further questions?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to adopt resolution 2026-12.
Thank you, Anthony. Second?
Okay, well, I like to second that motion, but can we have a real quick, brief recess?
Executive session.
No, just a quick, brief recess.
Okay. You guys asked for a brief recess, so if we could
Real quick.
honor that now.
Yep.
Okay. Sorry, try that again. It's been moved and seconded. Are there any further discussion on the matter? Any objections or abstentions? Okay, motion is passed.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kirsten. Now on to item number 8, summary of board member requests. Going to turn to Carol, if there's any.
Chair, there were no board member requests during Project Oversight Committee. Thank you.
With that, time is at 9:51. This meeting is adjourned. Didn't know that. I didn't know that. I always thought that 1 second.
No break? Can we roll right into finance?
Yes, we can.
Sorry about that, brother.
Ready to come up?
Ready, bro.
Good, okay. All right, good morning and welcome to the Finance Committee.
Here.
Lisa Baker is excused, Chris Takashige is excused.
Damn, sorry. Okay, let's start over. Today's a day of rehearsals, so.
All right, here we go. Good morning and welcome to the Finance Committee meeting. Today is Friday, July 24, 2026, and we will call the meeting to order at 9:52 a.m. I would like to begin by taking roll call of Finance Committee members. I am John Katahira, Finance Committee Chair. Vice Chair Kalana Park. Here. Roger Morton.
Here.
Lisa Baker is excused. Chris Takashige is excused. I would also like to note the presence of other board members, either in the room or on Zoom. Kiko Bukowski, Anthony Alto, Natalie Iwasa, Rick Keene, Kathy Sokugawa. Okay, moving on to the agenda, item number 2. Are there any members of the public in the audience or online who would like to provide testimony on any of the agenda items? Hearing and seeing none, let's move on to agenda item number 3. June 2026 cash flow report. Corey?
Morning again, Chair, Corey Ellis, Director of Project Control. COO Mike Keith will be helping me out with this presentation. So it's going to go over the June 2026 monthly cash flow report. This will be the final period of FY26. So starting with funding, number 1, we earned interest income of $8.5 million for the month. You can see that's against a projection. Just to clarify, our projection this month, we're comparing it to the last approved financial plan, April of 2025. So the projected column you see there is based off of our approved financial plan from last year. So you can see we did fall short for this month, but then comparing our actual year over year, which is the next table down, you can see we did increase or perform $12.7 million better than that plan. And a lot of that was aided by interest income of $35 million over the year when we had projected of about $4 million. So that did help offset some of the challenging TAT and other funding sources that we saw throughout the year. I'll pause there if anyone want to ask any questions or just continue.
Thanks, Corey. Any questions, committee members?
Chair, I have a question.
Please, Natalie.
Okay, so please bear with me. I'm not in my office. I'm trying to do this all from one laptop. So with respect to this change, the variance is negative 19 million. I think that the GET and TAT are lower than projected because of the timing that the state has with, that lag. Is that correct? That some more money for the state funding is going to be coming in July?
Hi, Natalie. It's Mike. I'll take that question. So, really, the deficits that you see in the table at the top aren't necessarily related to the timing of when you receive those funds. This is more related to projections that we had in our cash flow report relative to the financial plan. So we had been projecting that we were going to see this amount of GET, this amount of OTAT, OTAT, and interest income. And because we didn't, we're showing that as a variance or a less than amount for specifically the month of June. So because we had been projecting that we were going to be closer to the financial plan, the numbers that we identified in the financial plan, and we weren't, that's why those numbers are shown as negative there. What is I guess a more accurate picture of where we are relative to our GET and TAT collections on a broader scale for the fiscal year. It's in my opinion, it's more helpful to look at the second table on this page. That shows the financial picture, the closeout for the entire fiscal year of 2026 relative to the financial plan.
Okay, so I think I understand what you're saying. Then with respect to the full year, and perhaps this goes down to the next box that you have there, has anyone looked at the impact of the reduced TAT due to things like, banning vacation homes and in certain areas, or that type of issue? Because for anybody who doesn't recall, 1% of the TAT is a statewide TAT. And Maui, due to the Lahaina fires, they have done, if I'm correct, a lot of removal of their vacation homes or restrictions on their vacation homes. Oahu also had a law that was put into place removing some vacation homes or allowing them only to come up in resort areas. So I'm just wondering if in your analysis of what's going on, if you've taken a look at how those changes have impacted the TAT and whether we're going to continue seeing reduced actual amounts for the TAT.
It's a really good question, Natalie. We do scrutinize the information that we get from the state on GET and TAT, and actually all of the state funding information pretty closely. there's not, as far as I've seen, I can look at this further, there's not a breakout on the impact of that, of the short-term rental enforcement, and how that's affected the TAT collections. What I can say is that year over year, GET and TAT is up across the state. It's just not quite to the level that we have been forecasting in our financial plan. And I'll talk about that a little bit more on the next agenda item. But as the board knows, year over year, we project an increase of 4.8% on GET and 8.1% on TAT. Those collections are up at the state, but just not at those levels, which is why we've experienced some recent quarters where we haven't been meeting our projections.
I understand that. So, you know, I don't know. I think Maui kind of rolled back on some of their restrictions, and Oahu is, I think, has not been very good at enforcing the vacation home rentals where they're not supposed to be, where they're supposed to be banned. And so there's a lot going on with respect to that. However, I think that you may be able to look at the timing of collections and the timing that these laws, these restrictions were put into place, and then go forward, because as you likely know, these laws, when they're put into place, they take time for the city or the state to implement. They take time for the public to understand. And so we may not see much of an impact right now, but 2 or 3 years down the road, we may see more of an impact. And I understand it gets really complicated because we have increased, we have inflation, we have increased demand going on out there when we're reducing our supply. So things will naturally increase anyway, but I just request that you kind of try to follow up on that a little bit more, because I've always been concerned that those projections were too high to begin with. And we want to make sure that we're still pretty much on track with our major source of funding, which is the GET, but also the TAT that brings in quite a bit of funds. So thank you so much for your comments. Thank you, Chair.
Natalie, I actually just have a quick follow-up question or comment to your point, which is a really good one. So, with respect to the increased enforcement on the short-term rentals, do you mean that because there might be less use of the short-term rentals, we're then seeing less TAT that those rentals may have been collecting and then contributing to the state?
Right.
Okay, because I think what might be also happening too, and this is again very interesting and something I'll look into, is that I think by design that increased enforcement will push some of those vacationers into hotels where they're paying TAT at the hotels. So I don't necessarily think it would be a wash, but there would be that the TAT would be could be being paid from the short-term rentals, but now being paid from those same people who are now staying in hotels. Interesting thing to look at.
Right, and that's a very good comment as well. As I said, it does get to be quite complicated, but we just, when we put these restrictions in, and if there is enforcement and we do have less short-term rentals, then, I mean, logically you would expect to have less revenue. So thank you for your follow-up comments, and thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Natalie. I don't think it's showing up in the data yet, but I'm sure oil prices and jet fuel prices will have an effect on this as well. Getting into our state is going to be more expensive, let alone staying in the state.
It's an interesting comment. It kind of is showing up on the data, a little bit. That has some downward pressure in general on economic spending.
Sure.
those things in the economy. But also on the flip side, GET, or at the gas pump, you pay GET on when you pump gas, and so revenue is interestingly up there. So yeah, the nuances.
Very good.
Chair. Just a quick follow-up comment, though, and I appreciate the comments from Natalie, but, you know, if that's something that we're going to start looking at, and I think it makes a lot of sense, but I just quickly looked up, and although we've seen dips in visitor arrivals and visitors overall, there's actually been an increase in spending by almost 6%. So some of that may be offset by increase in spending and inflation as well. So just to provide a balanced
There's a lot of factors
discussion,
that
yeah.
into these things for sure. Yeah.
It's a great comment. Thank you.
And just to add to the complication, increased enforcement by the city may actually result in some vacation homes actually paying the TAT when they weren't paying in the past. So it's very complicated.
All good points. Thank you. Yes, Roger.
Just following up on Natalie, I'm a little confused. If this is a cash flow report, does this imply that in the month of June, we did not receive any cash for GET or TAT funds?
Yep.
It does imply that, and in fact, we did not. It just so happens that we received those funds in May for the quarter, and so we had in our cash flow report, we had to balance to the financial plan. We had been projecting these amounts in June.
Okay, so you overshot in May, presumably because you were looking at a monthly number there too.
May, yeah, I reported on May last month. It was slightly below the financial plan. These amounts were projected in June to balance up to the financial plan, and because we were low for the year in total, or we're just showing them as a negative variance in June. For the year, and again, it's a little bit confusing, and we're going to clean this up going forward. But the main thing that we want to focus on is the year picture on the second chart.
Yeah, the second chart, probably tells the whole story better. So
Clarify. So we have a new finance person, and I think this was just recently brought to light because we collect quarterly. So I was a little confused by this. I said, well, of course, it's always going to be zero for 2 of the 3 months. So it really should be, we're looking at it quarterly and we're looking at it for the year. So we're going to clean that up with the new fiscal year. So when you see July, you'll see a little bit difference, and that's the explanation that
makes sense.
That's why I just went back to go talk to Larry, like, why are we showing actual and a projected for month? We don't collect monthly.
So maybe a suggestion would be on that first table, the one that shows actual zeros for GET and TAT. Maybe a suggestion could be you can continue to show it monthly, but then also add columns to show it quarterly as well in the same table. Then that can, that will reflect monthly activity and quarterly. So I think that might help clear things up. Any other questions? All right, sounds good. Thank you.
Yes, well, I'll go to uses and the rest of the chart table. So for uses for the month, as expected, our figure. We spent $26 million for the month, the bigger one being CCGS contractor. They're going to continue to probably be our biggest expense going forward. We also saw real estate with you see a negative actual, and as the note indicates there was a refund due to an acquisition of a property. And then with the pre-cash yard, and we talked about the pre-cash yard, I believe last month. This was to catch up on invoices that we had been holding until we had an agreement in place. So that includes 6 months of invoices there. And then the next section, financing activities, continuing to do monthly repayments of $14.1 million maturities. And then on our variances, you'll see there we projected payments to CCR 3 and CCR 4 that didn't occur. We talked about the TPAR acquisition previously, and then we talked about the pre-cash yard as well. So it kind of captures variances for the month. That, I'll pause if there's any other.
All right, thanks, Corey. Committee members, any questions? No? Okay, very good. Thanks, Corey. Appreciate that.
Sure.
Oh, yes, Natalie?
Sure. Yeah, if I may, I'm not a committee member, but I do have one more question.
Sure.
So, with respect to the ending cash balance, and the current cash balance is very half healthy, and I know you have a lot coming up with the major work that's being done with Tutor Perini and the utilities. However, my question is, is there any potential to pay down the bonds, the principal, to make early payments and save money on the interest? Because it just looks like there's quite a bit hanging out there, and we have interest income, but I don't think it offsets the interest expense.
It's an excellent question, Natalie, and something we're talking with the bankers about right now, possibly defeasing some of our existing debt. And it is a dollars and cents question. Does it make more sense to pay down, save money on the interest payments by paying down or paying off that debt, assuming that there's no prepayment penalties?
Right.
Or do we just continue at the status quo and make some money off of our some interest income off of our cash while just paying down our scheduled debt service? But yeah, we are. It's a great question. We're looking into it now.
Okay, thank you. And then one other question. So, you folks are looking at, right now there's a permitted interaction group that's looking at potential extension planning. And at a previous board meeting, it was stated that there wouldn't be any costs with respect to that. I'm just wondering that, however, if there were, where would those costs show up in this detailed cash flow plan? Would they show up under something under HART or something else?
So the costs outside of, I'm sorry. Thanks for the question. Yeah, the costs outside of our scope fall into the non-project cost line item. So there are already a few items there related to stuff that we may have already purchased going towards Ala Moana. So if we do incur any additional costs on that side, that's where the line item will fall under.
Well, which number or which section is that done at the end?
If you go past the summary and you look into like the details, for example.
So let's say on page 2 of the annual financial plan, the cash flows, below, so you have total project costs, and then below that you have non-project costs. So it is tracked separately.
Okay.
Keep going, Ryan. The annual, make sure you're on the annual.
Yep, on this sheet here, go to the
Second
next
sheet.
page.
Next page.
And right there, focus right there in the middle.
Oh, yeah. Well, I guess that's the monthly. So same thing though.
Same thing.
But you see right in the, above the debt service dark blue line, there's a non-project cost. So it is tracked separately.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Those are my questions.
Thank you, Natalie.
Chair, I
Yes,
just have a
sir.
real quick one.
Yep, go ahead.
On the report summary, cash flow report summary, just out of curiosity, on the uses, is there a particular reason why we couldn't have a projected column and a variance?
No.
On the uses, is there a particular reason why we couldn't have a projected and variance column?
Yeah, we could certainly add that. The variance kind of shows that as well. I mean, but we're only highlighting like kind of the major plus or minus $1 million. But yeah, we can add a uses or a projected uses to that column.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. Good comment. Any other questions? All right, sounds good. Thank you, Corey. Appreciate it. Okay, let's move on to agenda item number 4, which is the GET-TAT funding update. Mike?
Yes, thank you. And so I talked a little bit about this on the previous agenda item, but we'll provide a little bit more detail here. So just to review the notes that are on the slides, most recent GET-TAT collections for quarter 4 of fiscal year 2026 was $111.8 million. That was a 1.4% increase over Q3 of 2026 and a 1.6% increase from the same quarter of fiscal year 25, so quarter 4 of 2025. In addition, we received $12.5 million from the Oahu TAT for last quarter. So that's for a combined total of about $124.3 million. That is $4.4 million below the total that we have in the financial plan for Q4 of fiscal year 2026. That's why on the chart you see the yellow, the blue, and the green representing OTAT, TAT, and GET respectively. That's still a little bit below that white line that represents the financial plan forecast. So yeah, again, six of the last seven quarters combined collections from these revenue sources have been below the financial plan. Again, something we're monitoring closely. But if we go to the next slide, I can show you a slightly bigger picture than this. We've looked at this slide for a couple meetings now. This is cumulative collections of GET, TAT, and OTAT from the adoption, the point of the adoption of the recovery plan, which is the year 2022. You can see each one of the 3 revenue sources there, but I'll maybe draw your attention to the bottom row there that totals all 3 revenue sources. That's the combined GET, TAT, and OTAT number. As I mentioned, all the way to the right, bottom right there, Q4 of fiscal year 2026, we were 4.4 below where we wanted to be, or where we had targeted in the financial plan. But cumulatively from 2022, we're still running at about $66.5 million above where we had planned to be in the financial plan. So overall positive that we have that excess, that $66.5 million excess. But we are continuing in this somewhat concerning trend of 6 of the last 7 quarters. When you combine all funding sources, I should say all funding sources on this screen, we've been below the financial plan. One other thing I'll mention too, and we covered it on on a previous agenda when we did the cash flow report. That actually gives you the bigger picture, or a better sense for where we are overall with the entire project's revenues. When you factor in other things, namely Corey had mentioned interest income, that's been a particularly positive item for us. For fiscal year 2026, we had targeted $4.6 million in revenue and interest income. We generated $35.2 million, so that was a bright spot for fiscal year 2026, and that went a long way to offset some of the deficits that we're seeing on this slide on the GET and the TAT revenues. Didn't quite make up for everything, but it made up for a lot. So overall, we're again, not to go back to the previous agenda item, but if you look at the overall revenue sources on the cash flow report, we're pretty close to the financial plan, within about $10 million of where we had targeted to be for the fiscal year that we most recently completed. one other thing I'll say about GET, TAT, and OTAT is that the projection for quarter one of fiscal year 2027, the quarter that we're in right now, kind of see a spike for quarter one. There's traditionally, that basically represents summer spending, a lot of holidays, vacation travel, and a lot of GET and TAT revenue into the state. So I mentioned earlier that, and you can see on the slide here, that the financial plan projection for Q4 of 2026, $128.7 million. The projection for Q1 of fiscal year 2027 is a little bit more than $10 million more than that. So we're jumping up in the projections to 139.8. We also anticipate an increase in revenue, as I mentioned, because those are the heavy tourist months during the summer. But it'll be another. I make that point to note that it'll be another challenging quarter for us, and we're going to keep a close eye on revenues. I think we're going to come pretty close to the financial plan in terms of GET, TAT, and OTAT revenue that we receive, but we might not hit that target of the financial plan again. That's something that we're tracking closely. Not really concerned with right now, again, because we have this excess that we accumulated since 2022, but something we're monitoring closely.
Okay, very good. Thanks, Mike. Any questions? Kika?
Yeah, so kind of on your last point, so not to get ahead of ourselves, but I mean, where are we in the forecasted financial plan? Are we increasing steadily over the course of the next couple of years, or are we kind of staying pretty static, or not?
Yeah, it's a great question and an important one. We haven't changed our long range forecast at this point. We still, the projections that we have in our financial plan, we're still confident that we can meet them. We still, as I covered a couple of slides ago, we are still seeing year-over-year increases. We're just not those increases just haven't been in the amount recently, haven't been in the amount that we had planned for in the financial plan. And, we were kind of talking about this a little bit internally the other day. We're really in some uncertain economic times right now, between inflation, between the Iran war, and as John mentioned, what that's doing to oil prices, and then the trickle down effect of what that could be doing to other tourism and spending. And despite all of this economic uncertainty and these things that are kind of dragging the economy down, we're still up. We're still up year over year, and the fact that we're under, but we're so close to the financial plan, to me, I take as a positive sign, in that if we're doing this well right now, considering everything that's going on around us, once we hopefully put that stuff behind us in the near future, hopefully before the end of the year, I'm very hopeful that we're going to get back to the numbers that we targeted in the financial plan.
Okay, so beyond first quarter of 27, are we still forecasting increases, or are we?
So we do, generally speaking, we do every year from now until 2030, we increase every year. For GET, it's a 4.8% year-over-year increase. For TAT and OTAT, it's 8.1% year-over-year.
Maybe, Chair, would it be helpful, so this white line, we have it all the way out to 2031, so maybe you can, because we're going to have another spike again for the next quarter, so maybe would that be helpful if we show what it's projected? And all that is, I know what Mike said about the 4.8 and 8.1. If you go 10 years prior to COVID, what it looked like, what the trend looked like, it just moved forward to what our 2022 to 2031 or 2030 projection is. So would that be helpful to see what the white line looks like?
I mean, I'll leave that up to the finance chair, but I mean, it might be helpful just to kind of.
You good, Kika?
I'm sorry.
Good?
Thank you. Yep, good, thank
Okay.
you.
Any
Sorry.
other questions? Roger?
Yeah, this question might be Corey, I think. Revenues are one thing. With the uncertain times, as Mike was talking about, and the higher rate of inflation for all things, including fuel, I know our contracts are fixed price, but how much of our contracts are indexed for increased costs, whether it be fuel or whether it be materials and that? I mean, those will, to the extent that they're indexed, they would result in higher costs for the contracts. Can you just give a little elaboration on whether that's significant or not?
Yeah, no, that's certainly something that we're monitoring, we track.
Microphone.
Sorry. So, thanks for the question. And,
Yeah, that is certainly something that we do track within our contracts. There's a provision for, I believe it's like short supply and other things. We measure using ENR rates. If it goes over a certain threshold, that we do pay the additional. Kind of depends if it goes up or down. So we're tracking it. It's part of our overall risk register that we track, and then we work with the contractor when they actually do submit, if they want to file a claim or anything for any of those hyperinflated
I guess the question was, to what level are they significant?
I'd say not that significant yet, but, I haven't fully of the impact of the false or anything yet. I guess to be determined. I know there's been some contracts recently that it's getting implied that they've been impacted as the starter of ships are here, as much as ships are here. So, we're seeing it, sure, but at this point, I can say something.
Anthony?
Chair, just to follow up, am I to understand that there's a paradox that when with general inflation, we benefit because the GET is being charged on inflated price goods, and the paradox is that the suppliers and the people we have a contract with can't claim back any of that inflation in costs until they hit the threshold. So there's a delta between the extra funds that we're getting because of the general rate of inflation, and yet the inflation in our contracts, because there's a threshold, doesn't quite match, and there's a delta in our favor. Am I understanding that right?
I wouldn't say we can say it's in our favor right now. And I'll speak broadly because I don't have all the details in my head, but generally the contractors will put an inflation escalation level in their contract. So they're accounting for a portion of that. Now, extraordinary things like a war is something we can't account for. There will be some inflationary impact and probably not to our favor. At this point, we just haven't seen that fully materialize into cost yet, but I do anticipate we will see some escalation and we'll pay a little bit for the inflation.
Thank you, Anthony. Any other questions? I have one, and forgive me for this. I probably should know the answer, but on the chart that shows the GET, TAT trends, is there a reason why it's GET and TAT only when we talk about interest income being fairly significant overall for us? Like, why not include that as well?
Yeah, it's a good comment, and we can include other sources of income.
Mm-hmm.
Historically, interest income hadn't been that significant.
Right.
It's just these were the in addition to our federal funding, these were the main sources. But
This was the request from previous board members, so Mike didn't know that.
But
so we can add whatever you want.
The white line indicates the financial plan forecast, though, right? Does the forecast itself exclude interest income? Is it only GET,
But it's very
TAT?
conservative by intent.
Oh, okay. Okay.
The author's right
Well,
here.
I mean, it was a different time back then, so
No,
maybe less significant.
Well, it was
Yeah.
intentionally kept conservative.
Okay. But I guess my comment is, if we're allowed to include interest income now, it might be a truer picture. Because we seem to be looking at this graph, but saying asterisk, we're excluding a significant source of revenue.
It's a really good idea, and it's, especially recently, given, it's a more significant part of our revenue. We can certainly include interest income. The one comment I'll share, though, about it is it's very inconsistent. For the year, it nets out at the year, and it nets out, as you can see, very positive for us. But the interest that we generate from our cash is because we invest in short-term government securities, like 30, 60, 90, 120-day government bonds, basically. And depending on when those bonds mature and we get our income from those bonds, we recently, for example, and I'm going to get the dates and the numbers incorrect, but like for Q4 of fiscal year 26, we had like, for 1 month it was like $500,000. Another month was like $700,000, and then the next month was like $8 million. It's just like a whole bunch happened to mature at that point. So we'll work it in, and maybe with that caveat, just to show it's a little inconsistent depending on when these mature.
Maybe just think about it. Like, I don't want to change the graph because I know that's going to change the historical components of the graph, but maybe it could be an asterisk in this figure.
Yeah.
As simple as that, and keep the figure as is, but just asterisk it to say that we are making up some of the shortfalls via interest income. All right.
Maybe not change the graphic, but the table.
Yeah.
Is simple enough that, kind of like what we do below the line for the EAC, below the line here, because then you could.
Or also, I'm thinking, on that last bullet, it says combined Q4 collections. As an example, you can just say,
put it on as a bullet point.
We're below 4.4 million, but interest income is blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And that might help.
Okay, and then, but do you want us to change the table? Add below the?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
That seems innocent enough. Okay, any other questions on GET, TAT? All right, thank you, Mike. But don't run away yet. Agenda item number 5, we have the HART FY27 operating and capital budgets schedule.
Yep, thank you. So we are already working on our fiscal year 2028 operating and capital budget requests. By board policy, we are to submit those requests to the Finance Committee by September 15th, which we will certainly do. Down the line, I think the board transmits the budgets to City Council, or HART, and the board transmits the budgets to City Council and the mayor by December 1st, and then it's considered by City Council. So, we're already working on it, and we will be reporting to the board very soon on our request.
My apologies, I misspoke. I said FY27. It's 28, which I cannot fathom. But I guess from our committee side, we're expecting to see preliminary budget in September if we're following the same schedule that we did last year. Preliminary?
Yeah. We will have that to you by September. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Sounds good. Any questions on that, members? All right, if not, moving on to agenda item number 6. Carolyn, please provide a summary of board member requests.
Thank you, Chair. There were actually a number of requests made. Board Member Iwasa requested that HART continue to monitor and report on economic trends that might be impacting our funding status via GET and TAT. Chair, you had requested or suggested that the monthly cash flow summary be modified to include quarterly income, not just monthly. And additionally, that, for future GET and TAT funding updates, that there be some sort of notation made or caveat that mentions the interest income that Hart may or may not be receiving in the overall picture. I think that was everything, but
No, I got a couple extra. So, Kika, you wanted to have the projected and variance columns added to the variance report. Also, that white line, we'll add that to the GET, TAT graphic. And then, yeah, what Carolyn mentioned, the income bullet point, and then add it to the table as well.
I noted, I think this was Natalie's point, to pay down debt.
Yep, I have that too. Yep,
Okay,
I have that too, yep.
at least
We'll
to,
look at it.
to
talk
consider, yeah, not
look-
to
look
do
at-
it,
Yeah, look
to
at,
consider
look-
it.
Talk to, so
Yeah.
Mike's going to talk to Bank
Right.
of America, yes.
right. Carolyn, we all good?
that's good. Thank you.
All right.
Chair?
Yes, Natalie?
If I may, I know this is just a point of business with respect to last month's requests. I had asked if we were going to have any kind of discussion on an internal audit function. And it was brought to my attention that we do have an internal audit committee, or I'm sorry, an audit committee. And so my understanding is that will be followed up in that particular committee rather than the finance committee. So I just wanted to put that out there in case anybody's following that issue.
Okay, great. Thank you for that update. And I guess if the audit committee recognizes the need for it, it would be helpful to have an estimated cost so that we can budget that cost into the proposed budget that's coming up. Okay. Is there any other business to discuss? Hearing none, this meeting is adjourned. It is now 10:36 a.m. Thank you.
This is a meeting of the Government Affairs and Legal Matters Committee of Hart. Start by taking roll. I'm I'll start with public testimony. Is there any testimony online or in the room?
Is there quorum?
Kiko.
Oh, no. Yeah, they turn themselves off. 2 out of 4 is a quorum, or is it not?
I'm taking this as 2 out of 3.
Because we don't have an appointee for the vice chair.
Right.
I'm guided by you, Kathleen.
I am taking committee members as comprised of 3 members. We have 2 members present. If you would like to, in an abundance of caution, appoint the chair as an ad hoc voting member in case there is some uncertainty about whether or not. That would be approved.
Yeah, I prefer to be safe. Kika, will you be, so we've appointed Kika Bukowski as interim board member. So there was no response to the request for public testimony. So moving on to item number 3, resolution of a settlement claim for damage and replacement of a streetlight pole and crosswalk sign on Nimitz. And I think we will hear from the city attorney.
Good morning, Committee Chair Alto and members of the Government Affairs and Legal Matters Committee. I am Daniel Kim, Deputy Corporation Counsel, here today in connection with this agenda item number 3. What is before the committee this morning is a request for approval of a tentative settlement that has been reached with the insurer for the responsible motorist for damage to a street lamppost and a crosswalk sign. That it arises from an accident that occurred on April 25, 2024, and a claim was presented to the insurer for the motorist responsible for this two motor vehicle accident. We've reached a tentative settlement, and what we wish to do is to address the committee in executive session to go over the specifics relating to the settlement that's being proposed.
Roger.
To go to executive session?
We are going into executive session.
Give me a moment to clear the room, please.
We're back out of executive session. We went into executive session to hear some details of this suit from our city attorney. I would just, for the sake of the public who might be asking why Hart is paying for a claim for a street sign, because we don't own the street. Laurie, would you just like to briefly explain why Hart?
Chair. Yes, Chair. So in this area.
Your mic.
In this area, it's technically owned by HDOT, but we have an agreement with them for the different segments that we're working on, whether it was the West Side Airport and City Center. So we still are temporary owners of this area from HDOT, so anything that occurs over there, we are responsible to fix when an accident happens.
Basically, we're responsible while we're in construction.
Yes.
Once we're complete, we hand this back to the Department of Transportation, and they assume liability.
Yes, Chair.
And the other thing I think we should explain is that there were two parties to the suit, and the total claims by both parties amounted to about 20,000 more than was insured, and so both claims had to be reduced, and so we're only getting back 35,000 out of the 48. Am I allowed to mention those details? I'm not allowed to mention those details in public. Correct, Dan? I'm not allowed to mention the precise details.
Yeah, sure, that seems fine.
Oh, it is.
Really?
No, Laurie had a horrified expression on her face.
The amount of the proposed amount of settlement is privileged until it goes to the full board, and then when it is before the full board for decision,
okay.
That is when it is not privileged. It becomes disclosed.
Legals. So I'm open to a motion.
I make a motion to accept Resolution 202611, settlement of claims for damages and replacement of street light and crosswalk signs on Nimitz Highway.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we pass this resolution. Any discussion? Hearing none, the resolution is approved. It goes to the board now.
Just to be safe.
I just did.
Any objection?
Yeah, I just did.
You ask for discussion or objection?
Mm-hmm.
You ask for discussion?
And yeah.
Did you take a vote?
No, I asked if there was any discussion or objections, and then hearing none.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Sorry. So hearing none, the motion is approved. Moving on to item number 4, City and County of Honolulu acting by and through Hart versus FMK Properties. Krista, over to you.
Thank you. This is a request for approval of settlement agreement. Next slide, please. Overview of the property is on the left. On the right, you can see the area that Hart needs to acquire. It's a electrical easement of 92 square feet for placement on a transformer. It's necessary to relocate utilities along the Dillingham corridor in preparation for construction of the rail. As part of CCUR 4 work, it was necessary to place a transformer within the easement area on the FMK property. Hart is acquiring the easement pursuant to the Hart-HECO utility inspection and property transfer agreement. After Hart and the owner were unable to reach an agreement, a condemnation action was filed. Through continued negotiations, a settlement has been reached, subject to approval by the Board of Directors. And if you have questions specific about the settlement, we do need to go into executive session.
Do we have any questions regarding the settlement? Do we have any questions that would not require going into executive session? In which case, I would call for a motion to approve this resolution.
I move that we approve the resolution.
It's not a resolution, it's just
pardon me.
approval of a settlement amount.
I move that we approve the settlement amount.
It then goes to the full board for approval as well, right? So we're recommending to the board. Yeah. Any discussion, objections? Hearing none, the motion is approved. Thank you, Krista. I believe there were no requests made. And
That's correct, Chair. Thank you.
And so we are adjourned.
5 minutes? Fine with me.
Morning. It is approximately 11:12 a.m. Call this meeting of the Board of Directors for Hart to order. First order of business is to take roll. Chair Kiko Bukowski is present. Vice Chair Chris Takashige is excused. Member Anthony Alto.
Present.
Member Don Takeuchi Apuna is excused. Member Lisa Baker is excused. Online, Natalie Iwasa. Sorry, Natalie.
Here.
Okay, thanks. And just to confirm, Natalie, can you please verify if you have anyone else in the room or if you're by yourself?
It's just me.
Okay, thank you. And let's see, Member John Katahira.
Here.
Member Jared Kawashima is excused. Member Rick Keene.
Here.
And we want to welcome Rick Keene as our newest member.
Thank you.
Thank you for agreeing to be part of our exciting family. Member Roger Morton.
Here.
Member Joe O'Donnell is excused. Member Kaulana Park.
Here.
Member Ed Sniffen is excused. And Member Kathy Sokugawa.
Here.
Thank you, Kathy. Okay, we have quorum, and moving on to the next agenda item, public testimony. Do we have anybody in the public that would like to testify on any of the agenda items listed on the Board of Directors meeting agenda? Anybody online that would like to testify on any of the agenda items listed? Seeing none, move on to agenda item number 3, CEO update. Lori Kahikina.
Thank you, Chair. So the first item, the Halekauwila Street Community Meeting. So as we are going to start the construction down coming that area, we know we're going to have impact on the community, and the businesses. So we wanted to have this informational briefing. We made it clear up front, we don't have all the details. We don't know exactly when Tudor Perini is going to be coming there, but want to get that information out. And as it gets solidified, we will be having one-on-one meetings with the businesses. And I was happy to see both Anthony and John Katahira there as board members. And it was quite a big turnout. To me, I think it was maybe close to 100. Maybe it was at SALT. Vance did a really good job. We did it by intent that he's just going to know the equipment. There's no equipment there to do a big PowerPoint, so it was just verbal, just sharing the information. Tudor was there as well. A lot of the Heart member team was there. And once Vance gave the introductions and what we're here for, what information we could share, we, by intent, did not have an open forum Q&A because I think it would have got out of hand. So we had display boards, 2 different sets on either side's corner of the room, and then the Heart team broke up to answer whatever questions we could. Predominantly positive. There were some concerns. One business in particular, they actually came to testify here to the board a couple of months ago. They're concerned that, well, you know, this could drive us out of business. And so I just made it clear that's your business decision if you want to stay, or, you know, maybe talk to the west side, how those businesses fared during construction. But other than that, I thought it was a very good, very well attended, very good feedback from the community there. I think it was more just interest. What we had some renderings of what the stations could look like. So I think, yeah, maybe John or Anthony, do you have anything that you want to add? No? Okay.
As you say, it was by and large, it was very positive.
Next item, Bill 48. So Bill 48 relates to the condemnation, and we received the board approval to go ahead and submit that to City Council. So right now, it was introduced on June 30th, July 7th. It did pass first reading at Council. It did pass out of committee on July 15th, Committee on International and Legal Affairs. They passed it out for second reading. So tentatively, if all goes well, it should be on the August 12th full council for second reading. And as it progresses, I'll continue to keep the board apprised of how it's going. The item C, the CEO professional development. So in my contract, I'm required to attend UC Berkeley, and so thank you, board, for allowing me the opportunity. It has already started. I will be gone on the week of August 17th. We'll be there at campus, but the homework has already started coming in. And then it continues for, after the 1 week session, it continues every Tuesday morning, so 5 a.m. in the morning for about 3 hours it's an online session. And then there's, like I said, there's homework to be done prior to each session. And then I believe there's a capstone at the end of the year, and I think one more visit to the campus. And then item D, APTA Rail Conference. So both Mike O'Keefe and Vance attended, so I'm forcing them to come and debrief the board on how they felt that conference went.
John Suda, Heart Project Director, and Mike and I had the privilege and honor to represent Heart at the APTA Rail Conference this year. I'll share some of my key takeaways, and Mike will provide his feedback. A lot of the sessions that I attended was focused on delivery method, and there was a lot of talk about progressive design build or progressive delivery method, and everyone looking for the solution to contracts that will work for both the owner side and the contractor side, and report to everyone that there's no silver bullet in terms of contracting method, delivery method. We've heard from agencies that use the P3 method or progressive design build or even construction management adverse CMAR method. And They all have their issues somewhat similar in terms of risk sharing. A lot of the times, we try to build contracts or delivery methods to push a lot of the risk on the contractor. That way the contractor has to deal with all of it. And then they price it into their bids and their proposals, and you essentially pay for it. The common theme, with everyone was, how do you share those risks and who's best to manage those risks? And it's a blended version of, some things contractors, appropriate to manage in terms of risk, and things that the owner should manage. Stakeholder engagement, for example, is something the owner has probably the best relationship with stakeholders versus the contractor. The construction means and methods, or some of the issues best suited for the contractor. So a lot of the discussion on how to, share risk, what's the best way to manage risk and move the project forward. Some of the other things were early works or early contractor engagement, and a lot of what we're applying here, with the utility relocation, getting the utilities out of the way before the big contractor comes in behind and has large equipment and, a number of staff working on the shafts and columns and whatnot. So glad to hear, what we're applying here is something that's applied elsewhere and what they're promoting to push and get early works done. Early contractor engagement as much as possible, what we did during the procurement for CCGS, going out to the industry and hearing from the industry what their concerns are, especially in Hawaii. We have unique situations. What are their concerns, and trying to risk share and build that into the contract. So early engagement and moving forward as we look to potential extensions and how we can implement both. Early works, obviously, again, utility relocation up front before the big CCGS, the Guideway Stations contractor comes through, and then early engagement, hearing from the contractors if they have concerns or what we can do to risk share. And then just a positive note in terms of, I think we've said this previously, how well known HART is within the industry. You're walking around, you have your name tag and it says HART. You hear of all these other agencies that are very large, BART, WMATA, and whatnot, and they're all well known. And walking through, people come up to us and say, "Hey, HART, we know HART. We know what you guys are doing. We're tracking your project, or we've previously worked on the project, or we know so and so that's working on the project, or even supplying tools and material." One we ran into that does measurements for back-to-back on the wheels on the train. As they just mentioned to us that, they were in contact with Hitachi selling some products to them. So again, HART is still, well known within the industry. We're leading. We tend to forget that, we have the first automated system, like rail system, and everyone knows who we are, even though we're out here in the middle of the ocean. So.
Just to add a little bit to what Vance was saying, so we overlapped on a lot of our sessions, and I did some others independent too. But it is great, I would say it's a great mix of transit agencies like us and consultants. So you get to hear, everybody's going through the same problems that we are having when they want to build stuff like utility relocation and mitigating risks and innovative contracting strategies to do that and produce the best system they can for their community. It's great to get all these people who are either going through it or working on solving these super common industry problems, getting together in a group in these sessions and just hear the different approaches to tackling these things. That in and of itself is super beneficial. Some of the focus, so Vance talked a lot about, the innovative procurement strategies from Progressive Design Bill, like how to share risk between your agency and the contractor. Really, the entity that's best equipped to manage the risk should be the one that's doing that. It's easy to put all the risk on the contractor in a contract. We heard a couple of times, like any lawyer will write you a contract that says, the contractor has 100% of the risk. But like Vance mentioned, they end up, the agency ends up paying for it ultimately. So what's a more progressive approach to do that? But on some of the sessions that I also did too were interesting, especially as the board starts to talk about and think more about extensions, how to creatively finance some of our capital investments going forward. There was a lot of discussion on P3. Some agencies across the country are having success doing that, but also a big one that's getting talked about. And I don't think it's necessarily a new thing, but there's a lot of discussion right now in the industry on value capture, tax increment financing, basically taking advantage of the increased tax revenue that the surrounding properties receive when a rail system comes to your community. There's a lot of money that's generated as a result of that, and a lot of these agencies out there are using that money to either offset operating costs or build future extensions. So that was very interesting. And then some other items too about special assessment districts around the lines that they're building, where the property owners pay an additional tax or an assessment to the city and county or to the agency just for being there because they have the benefit of the system right in their backyard, or even joint development agreements that not necessarily HART, because we're not engaged in TOD, but the city or our partners could use or actually HART could use too, because we do have land adjacent to some of our stations. But how do we jointly develop these properties with the community? Is there money to be made in terms of leasing these properties to the developers? Could HART or the city participate in the share of profits from the development that eventually comes to these areas? So all super interesting stuff. Like I said, especially as we start looking to the future and thinking about building more extensions to the system.
Members, any questions? Yes, Kathleen?
I don't have a question, but I've been to an APTA conference, even though I'm not a transportation or engineer by any means, but it's really good. So if you ever thinking of going, I would recommend going. But the thing about tax increment finance, just FYI, historically, this comes up every 3 years or so at the state legislature. There seems to be lawyers that feel we need a constitutional amendment before the counties can introduce it. So it's not a new topic. It's been tossed around for a decade or so. So it's something that Hawaii is familiar with, but hesitant to give the counties.
Thank you. Yes, Roger.
Yeah, having looked at the evaluations around transit systems, even this one here, most of the increase has already been realized, right? Because it's always the valuation is done for the future, and when you do compare the half-mile or quarter-mile circumference around the stations, and you compare it with the general tax increase island-wide, it's a massive difference. The valuation around the stations over the last 30 years have gone up a lot faster than the valuations around just in general for the island. So a lot of that, because tax increment usually is the increase from the time it's done going forward, but a lot of that's already been realized by the landowners.
Yeah. But it's a great point. It's in a sense too late to do it on the existing system, right? But like I mentioned, as we talk about future extensions, now is the time to potentially take advantage of that. Yeah.
Members, any other questions? Yes, Kalana.
Quick, so I know there's several APTA conferences throughout the year. The one that you folks went to, were there other board members from various states that attended? And if so, is it worth our while to go to some of these things?
I attended. One is sitting next to
I have a comment.
You went, right? Yeah.
That's not, it's not active, but.
Oh, it wasn't APTA. Oh, okay.
So I have a comment on that, Kalana, at the appropriate time, though, if you guys want to.
I'm not sure if there were board members there.
Yeah, there was a lot of engagement with other transit agencies. They were the main focus because they were the ones on stage sharing their experiences, and then in the exhibit hall with the consultants. But yeah, I personally didn't come across any other board members at this particular conference.
Thank you. As far as impact goes, that's a good conference, and I know that the city, because they have governance over that conference, they're getting 3 free registrations for it, of which I think only 1 is being taken up. So there potentially could be 2 additional registrations that are available for that conference, which I think is in October in Toronto, Canada.
Any other questions, members? Comments? Yes, Colin.
I don't know, I'm not sure who the powers to be for these APTA conferences, but it would be nice to have one in Hawaii. Just trying to get, more.
Yeah. Well, we'd like to get one in Hawaii. In fact, we just, when during the rail conference, I don't want my Maui friends to get mad at me, but we switched the business members meeting in 2028 from Maui to Oahu, primarily because of Skyline, and it's more transit here, and the people that wanted to talk about transit beat out the people that wanted to talk about golf. So there is going to be one here. I think there's an opportunity, maybe after grand opening, and maybe should start talking to APTA now, about having one after Skyline is completed. It's very hard to have a conference in Hawaii because they're all public officials, and they, Las Vegas and Hawaii and other resort places are, sometimes local boards won't send their staff, and so it's kind of hard. So I think there could be an opportunity, though, with Skyline again, to maybe get a rail conference here, but probably those are usually planned out 2 or 3 years in advance, so we're already up to 28 or 29 or something, so maybe targeting 32 or something like that would be a good thing, and those conversations have to start almost now, and then they get finalized maybe in the 28, 29 timeframe, so but it would be great. We've had APTA conferences here before, but the small kind, the business members and those kind of things. I think Lori and I both gone to the local ones here, but we're going to have 200 people in 28 that'll be coming, 200 to 300 people.
Thanks, Roger. Any other questions, comments, members on APTA or any of the other? Lori, are you through with your update, or you want to?
Oh.
Any other questions or comments on the CEO update? I have one, not necessarily for you, Lori, but on like community meetings, and this is more for Kathleen. Are we still subject to sunshine on like the Halekauila community meeting? Are we still subject to sunshine as board members?
Yes, there is a sunshine law exception that would allow board members, but less than a quorum, to attend community meetings like that, and then they report to the board, back to the board after the community meeting.
So less than a quorum would be 5?
Yes.
Okay, so just FYI for future. Yes, Kathy?
Question
Yes.
on that. So does that only apply to voting quorum members?
No, all members.
So Kathleen, I think, so that's a good question, because, I mean, although the appointed members are recognized by the board as members, but they're not counted towards quorum.
And we don't vote.
Yes. So
So, I mean, I think we've, I've taken the position that for like pig attendance and pig participation, I don't see them as counted towards sunshine. Is that something that we could get clarification on? If the legislative appointed members would be subject to sunshine as well.
Well, permitted interaction groups are an exception to sunshine already.
But only up to less than a quorum.
Correct.
Right, so if we exceeded the quorum where we had 5 voting members as part of a permitted interaction group, but I've taken the position that appointed members by the legislature could also attend, and we would not necessarily be in violation of sunshine. That's my understanding, or my read of it, because they're not technically voting members or counted towards quorum.
I can follow up with you separately on that,
Okay.
Chair.
Thank you. Thanks.
Kiko,
Yeah.
follow up on
Yes.
that. So Kathleen, if I heard you correctly, whoever attends a public meeting has to do a follow-up to the board? Is that what you said?
Yes.
Written report. No, I'm just kidding.
Exactly. I mean, what does the report in your mind include? So for example, it was stated that Anthony and I attended the most recent Haliko'ila meeting. What report would you expect out of our attendance?
Your report back about your observations, your participation, what your takeaways were from the meeting. There's no specific criteria set forth in law.
Okay, and then does that report have to be shared here at the board meeting? Or?
Yes.
It could be a verbal report. right?
Yes.
If I'm in the clear, you're in trouble.
Okay.
I think what you guys provided today was sufficient, right? In the committee.
I don't know that it was an intentionally a report. I think it was some impressions. I don't know if a report to the board would have differed, if you knew that you were under requirement to report to the board. But again, we can discuss this separately.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And then as far as the rail conferences go, not just APTA, but I think for all conferences, and, I really believe that, to Kaulana's earlier point, that these conferences can be very helpful and useful and valuable to HART as a whole, but more specifically to board members to attend some of these conferences if they're able. So I'm maybe as a to-do, maybe Carolyn, if maybe you could put together a list of pending conferences for the remainder of this year, and maybe conferences in 27. Just a brief description of what they are, when they are, where they're at, and kind of a brief description of what they cover. I know that some conferences actually speak directly to policy and governance, which I think would be hugely helpful. But aside from that, I think just having some board members attend some of these conferences would be positive for the board. We did budget some money towards conferences, so if anybody is interested, please get with Carolyn and we can work out the details on a case-by-case basis. But I highly encourage it. I think it would be helpful. So also regarding, I just had a quick question for Mike and maybe Vance, or just in general. You mentioned joint development agreements. Did you see any instances where they discuss joint development agreements for the construction of the rail station itself that incorporated mixed use or even residential or commercial?
I guess the short answer is yes. Some of the agencies that presented on this, that topic, like Maryland MTA, is one that sticks out in my mind as an example. They talked about it more in kind of broad programmatic terms. I know that they're pursuing that. Exactly how that's incorporated or where it falls into relative to the system, I don't know that they went into that level of detail, but Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
happy to research that further.
Yeah, I guess, as we're kind of discussing, I guess, potential extensions and whatnot, and possible creative ways of offsetting the cost of construction and financing. Maybe it's something that we can take a look at as far as joint development agreements to monetize the station itself and offset the cost of the construction of the station. Yep.
Get more information on that for you.
Sounds good?
Yep.
Thank you.
Chair,
Yes.
just on the comment on that, in the early days of HART planning, it was discussed particularly in the Kakako stations, including the kind where real sexy, the train stops inside a building and then goes out. And there have been other offers in the past, but I'm not familiar with current efforts to joint develop. But I think the one that actually sort of is a joint development, kind of is actually there, you can look at it, is the Kakako station with Stanford Carr. Because he built his project, I forget the name of it, around the anticipation that the station was going to stop next to his property or on his property. So that would be an indication of a real joint development. I don't know the financial breakdown though.
Yeah, I think this is a perfect time maybe to look further into some of those as possibilities going forward. Any other questions, comments? Seeing none. Natalie, you good? Okay, thank you. And let's move on to agenda item number 4, Resolution 2026-11, Settlement of Claim for Damage and Replacement of Streetlight Pole. This item was taken up previously in the Government Affairs and Legal Matters Committee. Chair Alto, do you have a recommendation?
That's right. Your committee is recommending approval of Resolution 2026-11-11.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and second. Is there any discussion on agenda item number 4, Resolution 2026-11? Seeing none, are there any objections to the adoption of Resolution 2026-11? Seeing none, Resolution 2026-11 is adopted. Moving on to agenda item number 5, City and County of Honolulu, HART versus FMK Properties. I believe this was also taken up in Government Affairs, Legislative, Legal Matters. Chair Anthony Alto, do you have a recommendation?
Yes, Chair, your committee met and recommended approval of this motion. So I'd like to move, actually, what is the resolution number? There isn't a resolution number, but we recommend approval.
Okay, just for clarification, this is a...
It's a settlement between the property owners.
It's a settlement.
Eminent?
Instead of
Settlement? Okay.
going to eminent domain, we came to a resolution or
Okay.
an agreement.
So we have a motion to approve agenda item number 5. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Thank you. Is there any discussion on agenda item number 5? Seeing none, are there any objections? Seeing none, agenda item number 5 is adopted, approved. Moving on to agenda item number 6, eminent domain resolution 2026-12. This item was heard previously in the Project Oversight Committee. Chair Park, do you have a recommendation for the board?
Yes, thank you. Sure, yes, the PLC committee did discuss the item and approve. So we'd like to make a motion for approval.
Second.
Yeah, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on agenda item number 6, resolution number 2026-12? and this is for eminent domain action on property located at 617 Dillingham Boulevard, by and between Hart and Hawaiian Electric Company. Any discussion? Seeing none, is there any objections to the motion? Seeing none, the motion is approved. And let's see, agenda item number 7, Core Systems Contract Change Order. This agenda item was also heard previously in the Project Oversight Committee. Chair Kaulana Park, do you have a recommendation for the board?
Yes, Chair, thank you. It's again, it's discussed. Approved. So if that's it, I'll make a motion for approval of course system change order.
Okay, and then just for clarification, as was pointed out by Corp Counsel, this is, we are recommending to the Executive Director to approve the requested change order to this particular contract. And I think, we will, well, yeah. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded, moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none?
No.
Yeah, Roger?
No.
You good?
I'm good.
Okay. You sure?
I'm sure.
Okay. Any objections? Seeing none, the motion is approved. Before,
Chair, if I can just comment on everything that happened just now.
yes. go
It
ahead.
seems like we're rushing through this,
Yeah.
but really, and this is mainly for the people who are, might be viewing this meeting, a lot of the discussion, all the discussion happened at the committee level. So if there is interest in learning more about the why, please visit the committee meeting.
Yeah, and, I appreciate that, John. And I, if you've been following the Hart meetings for the last several months, I think what we were trying to do here is make it a little bit more efficient. I think all the members show up for the committee, and they're all welcome to show up for the committee meetings, regardless if they're a member or not, and participate, although they may not be able to vote necessarily on the particular items, but they're able to fully participate and ask questions in committee. So just to kind of try to move things a little bit more efficiently and give deference to the committees and committee chairs, we thought we would try the process of hearing more substantive discussion in committees. And then when we get to the full board, it's really taking the recommendation of each committee and the committee chair and acting on it as a full board. But like John was saying, most of the substantive discussion has already occurred in the committee meetings. So for the public, if you'd like to hear more or understand more of the substantive discussion on each of these agenda items, we would ask that you tune in for the committee hearings. And the full board is more or less taking the recommendation and acting on it as a full board. And of course, there could be further discussion at the full board level if that's necessary or if that's needed on a case-by-case basis. We're definitely not trying to rush through things. We're just trying to be a little bit more efficient, but by all means, if there's any agenda item on the full board that requires further discussion or further explanation, we definitely will allow for that. And it's not an attempt to rush through things. It's just to be a little bit more efficient and not redundant in the business that we do.
Chair?
Yes.
Just kind of along those lines, I think it was item number 4 that committee chair was going to talk about the settlement differences and then was told that couldn't be discussed until the board level. If I remember correctly, is that something that we can mention just for the public now at this point?
Sure. If Committee Chair Alto, would you like to elaborate or expand on Resolution 2026-11?
Certainly. It's in relative terms, it's quite a Manini matter. It's not a huge expenditure. The Hart is responsible for the street in areas where it's doing construction, it has an agreement with the Department of Transportation that it takes responsibility. There was an accident in an area that was under Heart's control per their agreement with the Department of Transportation. The two vehicles involved in the accident submitted insurance claims that came to $70,000. The insurance limit was $50,000, and so the amount that was settled was less for each of the claimants. In Heart's case, we paid $48,000 to replace the street signal, but the amount that we received from the insurance company was only $35,000, so we were out of pocket $13,000. But that's the way the insurance business works, and we didn't really have any option. The only option would have been to go to court, to file a tort suit, and as the city's attorney pointed out to us, the attorney's fees would have been substantially more than the $13,000 delta that we have to pay out of pocket.
So, yeah, I guess just to, reiterate what Chair Alto just said, part of the discussion and what went into the decision, as was brought up by some other board members as well, was that the cost of litigating would have far exceeded what we could potentially recoup. So that's part of the reason why we decided to vote in favor of settling at this point. And, maybe to John's point, and I take responsibility for this, maybe the committee chairs, when we get to the full board and we get to your agenda item that was heard in your committee, I might ask for a little bit more, substantive description of the agenda item rather than just the agenda title and heading itself, just so that members of the public can follow along with what we're doing. So maybe just be prepared in the future. If we have recommended items for action from committees, if the chairs of each of those committees can just be prepared to give a very brief description of what the general gist of the item for action that we're taking up, that's being recommended to the board. Good discussion.
Agreed.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it. Is there any other discussion or? Yes.
Just wanted to apologize to you and the rest of the board members and those on public that I've never been able to do a 15-minute project oversight committee, so that'll never happen.
But you were very enthusiastic about trying.
Yeah. I've given up trying.
Okay. So with that said, let's move on to agenda item number 8. This is the Ala Moana and Beyond Permitted Interaction Group report. So I believe on this agenda item, last month, the Permitted Interaction Group report was submitted to the board. There was brief description, very brief description and discussion presented to the board. And the process calls for it to sit for a period of time, and then at the next board meeting, we take up full discussion on the PIG report. So that's what we're going to do at this point in time. And so with that said, I want to open it up to the chair of the PIG, the Permitted Interaction Group for Ala Moana and Beyond, Anthony Alto, if you wanted to say a few words or.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. The reason we're even talking about extensions today is because Heart's reached a watershed. Completion of the minimum operable segment is now within sight, and the system is working brilliantly. Skyline is the most efficient mass transit system in the country. It sets a new American standard for safe, driverless, automated urban rail transportation. Beyond that, Skyline is the only mass transit project in the nation that will be debt-free the day it is completed. And despite all the problems we've had, mile for mile, its cost is comparable to other metro projects around the country. Since Lori Kahikina became CEO 5.5 years ago, construction has stayed pretty much on schedule and on budget, and that's a remarkable achievement. We have experienced none of the embarrassing failures that plagued previous administrations, the mismatched wheels, the frogs, the cracks in the columns, the post-tensioning. Those are all legacy problems inherited from previous administrations. The only significant construction issue under Laurie's team has been the sweeps on Dillingham, which she brought to our attention immediately, and whose impacts they've done everything possible to minimize, as we've heard again today. We have gone from being on the FTA's spit list to being a trusted partner. Again, thanks to Laurie, as well as to former Chair Colleen Hanabusa, no doubt assisted by you, Kika. That is why I would argue that Laurie and her team are now the most competent large construction project management team in the state. But perhaps precisely because they have succeeded and because the end is in sight, this management team will soon have to start to disperse if they do not have extensions to work on. Simply put, the heavy lifting on segment 3 is nearly done. I believe it would be a historic mistake to allow that hard-earned expertise and experience to fritter away. So that is part of the reason we must start the conversation about extensions now. We are sometimes asked, I don't know if other members have been asked, but we're sometimes asked why the conversation can't wait until segment 3 is finished and open. That would be too late. Of course, keeping the management team together is not a reason for building extensions, and I think it's important to reiterate the true reasons. First, Skyline has been a stunning success in addressing the issues that led me and the Sierra Club and many others to support it in the first place. It has fundamentally changed Oahu's development patterns. Nearly 40,000 housing units are now planned for along the Guideway, the majority of them affordable. If it weren't for Cut Skyline, we would be trying to build that urgently needed housing in suburban sprawl developments in the central plateau between Wahiawa and Haleiwa or in Waimanalo. The fight over those developments would be tearing our community apart, and the cost to build new roads and utilities to service those new sprawling suburbs would be in the billions. That was the alternative to building the rail. It was always going to cost us. If CART had never been created, the city wouldn't have saved $10 billion. We would instead have had to spend that money building the infrastructure for suburbs and for more roads. Because of Skyline, we will never again see a proposal to build another Ho'opili or Koa Ridge. Suburban sprawl over our best food-growing farmlands is a thing of the past. So I think residents of the North Shore and the Windward side should stop whining about how they will never ride the rail and celebrate that it is helping to keep the country. But here's the thing, if we build 40,000 housing units along the rail and don't build extensions, how are those people supposed to move around? There are 27,500 units planned for Iwilei and Kalihi alone. That could be more than 50,000 additional commuters. If we don't build extensions, it'll be a traffic nightmare. To go back to basics, transportation is tied with food as the second largest item in the average family budget. It costs more than $10,000 a year to keep a car in Oahu, and more than 80% of households on Oahu have 2 or more cars. So if the rail project can help 50,000 households give up just one of their cars, that would be a collective savings of $500 million a year, year after year. If we're serious about tackling the cost of living crisis for our least affluent families, we have to continue to expand Skyline to the places that people need to go. At a minimum, that means Waikiki, UH Manoa, and Kapolei Commons. Another reason for building extensions that wasn't contemplated 20 years ago is that it is going to help communities adapt to the 6 feet of sea level rise that we can anticipate by the end of the century. We're simply not going to be able to afford to elevate every road in the flood zone, but rail is already elevated. And in fact, last year we saw during the tsunami scare how thousands of people fled to Skyline stations because they understood they were safe from tsunamis. Simply put, the state cannot meet its goals to tackle the cost of living crisis, the affordable housing crisis, the climate crisis, or our commitment to decarbonize our economy without building extensions. The ridership numbers are growing, support for rail is growing, and I would argue that now is the time to be ambitious. Of course, to pay for extensions, we have to extend the GET surcharge. Personally, I think we should be looking for it to be extended in perpetuity, or at the very least for another 30 years. This report looks at multiple ways to expand the system, and it comes up with some ballpark figures on cost. Those numbers are purely illustrative. They're just ballpark numbers. They're not numbers you can hang your hat on. The actual numbers will come when the Oahu Metropolitan Planning Organization, which is the federal agency charged with transportation planning, releases its estimates. As regards the extensions themselves, we looked at the cost of going underground because members of the legislature have indicated that they might insist that any extensions Diamond Head of Ala Moana be built underground. And as you will see in the report, that looks prohibitive. We also looked at the cost of at-grade streetcars or trolleys, which would be a much cheaper way of extending the service to places like Mililani. In that regard, extensions to to Kapolei, Waikiki and Kapolei Commons would complete the central spine of the system, to which we could then attach streetcar routes, or in the future we could have autonomous vehicles operating as taxis and shuttles. And for those in the public who have often suggested that building transit is building something that's obsolete because autonomous vehicles are going to replace mass transit, there's a lot of research out there, and it says simply that it's going to be too expensive and it actually would make traffic worse. One area where I suspect that the minority report differs from the majority is that I advocate looking at an alternate route to get to UH Manoa. By going up Pensacola and along King Street, we would avoid the flooding that will be hitting Kapiolani within just a few decades, whereas everything Mauka of King Street will be safe from flooding until well into the next century. The King Street corridor, close as it is to Waikiki, downtown, and UH, is one place the city is obviously going to grow. But more importantly than that is the fact that there is considerably more development potential in the King Street corridor, which means that a public-private partnership in which developers contribute potentially hundreds of millions of dollars to the construction of the rail has real potential. In fact, Council Chair Tommy Waters keeps telling me that HART should be finding sources beyond taxpayer dollars to pay for the rail. Going down the King Street corridor would be a great way to do so, and in fact that's backed up by a study that's been done by the Kobayashi Group, which is referenced in the report. I realize that the Council has told us to stick to the routes that were approved in the locally preferred alternative that was passed in 2007. I think we should ask the council to reconsider. They shouldn't feel obliged to stick to the LPA. The research for the LPA is now well over 20 years old, and conditions on the ground, especially around Ala Moana, have changed. And in any case, the environmental impact study that's required for any extensions will inevitably be obliged to do an alternatives analysis. The King Street route is an alternative that has the potential to save taxpayers millions of dollars, and so I believe we are duty-bound to consider it. Out west, the master plan for Kalailoa suggests a different route to the LPA to facilitate development, and I think we would be remiss if we did not look at that too. And as for Waikiki, it may surprise people to learn that the hotels support an extension to Waikiki so long as we terminate at Fort Tarusi. And the reason they support it is because the number one complaint of visitors, they've told us, is the cost of parking their rental cars overnight, and because hotel staff have such a hard time commuting. Senior hotel executives that I have spoken to would even be prepared to include the cost of a daily holo card in their resort fees, and this has the potential to provide tens of millions of dollars every year for operations and maintenance, which could be used to lower fares or to lower the city's subsidy. Another area in which I suspect my colleagues might disagree with me has to do with the GET. It's no secret that members of the legislature are looking to claw back some of the surcharge that pays for HART. I've heard from several elected representatives. In fact, as recently as last week, a senior senator told me that they were already considering how to spend the GET windfall. My term on this board is technically over. I'm a holdover at this point. And as soon as I've stopped being a holdover, I'm going to vigorously lobby for HART to retain the GET surcharge. I think we have to be resolute in pushing back and stressing that rail is one of the most powerful tools to fight the cost of living and affordable housing crises. But I think we have to be realistic in acknowledging that some of the funds might be diverted. And so I think it makes sense for us to get out ahead of the ledge with the proposals of our own. So in the report, we suggest taking 10% of the surcharge revenues and using them to reimburse less affluent households. The GET is a regressive tax, and 10% could put about $650 a year into the hands of the 54,000 low-income people who qualify for the low-income tax credit. $650 is real money. I would also suggest that we ought to put a certain amount of the revenues, I've suggested $50 million a year, into an infrastructure fund to help pay for the new utilities needed for those 40,000 housing units that are projected along the guideway. Finally, it took HART a long time to master the skills to build a rail system. The report takes a frank look at the audits and then the investigations into what went wrong with HART in the past. We're not making those mistakes today, and we should build on our success. In conclusion, I just want to say that no HART time or money or resources were used in researching or writing this report. But it was written with the help of several experts who have chosen to remain anonymous. Some of them put in literally hundreds of hours of work, and I want to publicly acknowledge them and to say mahalo. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Anthony. Roger?
Yeah, as a member of the PIG, first I wanted to thank Anthony for the tremendous amount of effort and work that went into preparing the report. Truly a Herculean effort, really, and many, many great ideas. Many of the statements that you just did, I would be remiss if I didn't say that I support the concepts that you're talking about. However, we did not vote in the PIG to endorse the report. And there was a number of reasons why we didn't, and you've actually pinpointed many of them, but I'll go through a couple of them anyway. Number one, we felt that there was a need for consistency within an established planning process. And that meant that we largely thought that an extensions report, Ala Moana and beyond, should be beyond the MOS, but within the LPA. That seems to be what council has provided for us under Bill 60, which is even a novel thing that came after the PIG was established. But we think Bill 60 is a game changer, and that we should confine ourselves to the authority that council has done under Bill 60. The value of the report, to me, it's a very visionary report, and it should be recognized as a visionary report. But I don't think it is a report that the Hart Board should put its endorsement behind, because I think it would be confusing for residents to figure out. There are efforts at OMPO, there are efforts within Hart, there are efforts to look at developing a concept of where extensions make sense, and trying to do them within the confines of established federal policy for how one gets federal funding in the future. The report, as you have, is a very visionary report. Again, I commend you for the effort that you put into it. But I don't think it would serve the city at this point to endorse the report, although I think residents could find a lot of visionary stuff in the report, and the report is a public report, so it's available for the public. But those are my views.
Thanks, Roger. Any other members have any comments or questions regarding the permitted interaction group report, Ala Moana and beyond? Rick?
I'll share a couple of my thoughts. And again, like Roger said, I commend you for the work that you did on this. I think a lot of the items that you point out in there, including the reason for rail, the benefit it could bring, the cost that it impacts families on, I think are very, very good points. And those are consistent with what you've commented on over the years. But I agree with Roger in terms of the board taking action on a report. I find it interesting, just broadly, from other work I've done with other boards, that a report can get elevated up for full board consideration when the committee that it was developed under did not approve the report. I also think, as Anthony pointed out, Hart was not involved in the review of many of the items in that report. They did not review them for constructability or for reasonableness, including the cost numbers that are out there. So I think for this board to try to take action in any way on a report like that, that management, which we're in charge of overseeing, did not even take a part in, is not appropriate. So I commend you and I thank you for the work that you did on it. I do think it has a lot of good value, but I think it's out there, as Roger said, and I think that should kind of be the end of it.
Thanks, Rick. Any other questions or comments from any other members?
I got one.
Yes, John.
So Anthony, thank you for your hard work. Question more on the cost side. I know you said that the costs that are provided in the report are only ballpark. Could you please describe the base methodology on how these costs came to be?
Yeah, the costs were put together by an expert who's worked on mass transit, and specifically rail, for many years. And what he did is he took the CCGS contract that we signed with Tuda Perini, the costs in that, and he took the FTA costs looking at metro systems across the country and used a combination of those to come up with ballpark figures. So they're in the ballpark, but they are guesstimates, if you like. That we did not have access to the sophisticated computer systems that OMPO has, the computer programs, I should say, that OMPO has to come up with more accurate estimates. I think they're more useful as a basis to compare costs, say, between the underground and elevated and at grade, rather than they are for looking at what the precise numbers might be. So they are they're not plucked out of the air. They're based on very concrete. There's a very concrete basis for coming to those numbers, but we're not asking the board. I should say the report was drawn up without any thought that it would require the board to take action or to provide direction for HART. It was always intended as to be a visionary document, to talk about the future, to think ambitiously, because we've come to that moment. Laurie has brought us to that moment where we can afford to think ambitiously. Ridership is growing. The popularity of the system is growing, and I think we should seize on that.
I agree that there's tremendous momentum. Going back to my methodology question, do you think the cost estimates provided in the report, do they include I'll just call them non-construction costs, or guideway or station construction costs, such as like land acquisition, maybe utility relocation, system costs? Are they represented in the cost estimates provided in the report?
No, I don't think that those elements, well, I think there is a general provision, but we didn't look precisely. I mean, in other words, we didn't say, look at the cost of Dillingham and include those utility relocation costs.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Any other questions, comments?
Yes,
Members?
Chair.
Yes, Natalie.
Just one comment, and I don't think that this will come as a surprise to anybody there who has listened to me over the last decade or so. But Anthony mentioned that potentially the the surcharge could be extended another 30 years or in perpetuity. And so I just wanted to note that, we were told that was going to be a temporary tax. I guess potentially the state legislature could take it away from rail and put it into something for the state. But I just wanted to put that on the record. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Anthony.
Thank you.
Thanks. Natalie, just on that, I haven't talked to a single elected official who thinks that the GET surcharge is going to go away. What they think is it'll stay, but the state can hive off some of those funds and spend them elsewhere. That's the reality. That's the conversations that are going on at the moment. You might think, and I would sympathize with the idea of we should just do away with it, let the tax lapse. But if it's going to continue, I think it should continue, and the revenue should be spent on the purpose for which it was originally put in place. It should be spent on transportation. It's the second largest item in the average family budget, and some of the causes for which the elected representatives are talking about hiving off this money are not as important, and that don't have as a significant impact on the average family budget as transportation. And I think that's a message that we should keep hammering away. I'm not sure if the board will feel comfortable doing that, but I'm not going to be on the board much longer, so I feel comfortable going to the ledge and beating the drum.
Understood.
Thanks, Anthony. Any other members have any questions, comments? Lori, do you have anything to add or?
Sure.
No? Okay. Well, I guess, so just maybe just to give a little bit of, I guess, background maybe for the public. And so what we have right now, what was presented last month was the PIG report, Permitted Interaction Group, Ala Moana and Beyond. And in that report was a history of the meetings that occurred in the Permitted Interaction Group, and of which was an ultimate discussion and decision whether or not to support or not support the report that is being referred to by the PIG chair, Anthony Alto. So it was included in I guess distributed to the members as well as to the public last month as an Appendix A on the Permitted Interaction Report. The recommendation of the PIG by the majority of the PIG was not to support Appendix A, which was the report that Anthony is referring to. You know, from my point of view, and I did serve as a member of the Permitted Interaction Group, and although I agree with a lot of what Anthony is discussing from a illustrative or visionary standpoint, you know, I mean, we have to look at things from a realistic point of view, especially, and I know Lori can appreciate this when it comes to managing expectations of the public. And you know, the reality of it all is what we put out as a board, as an organization, as HART, is oftentimes, I wouldn't necessarily misinterpret it, but interpreted the way that people want to interpret it. So we have to be very careful and cautious on the information that we put out in the public because of that very fact that it may be interpreted the way that we didn't intend it. That's the unfortunate reality. You know, it's was not necessarily planned out, but you know, Bill 60 happened to be adopted subsequent to the formation of this Permitted Interaction Group. Had it been adopted prior to, maybe the outcome of the Permitted Interaction Group would have been different, but it wasn't. And you know, my position and the reason I had concerns about the way that the report was drafted by the chair was that it did not fall. I believe my position was it didn't fall within our authority at the time, and still, you know, doesn't fall within our authority as an organization. We're clearly given the ability to develop beyond the minimum operating segment, for those of you MOS, minimum operating segment, but within the LPA, the locally preferred alternative, which was the approved line by the city council and by the city. So, you know, and then when we talk about extensions of the GET and funding sources and whatnot, the reality of it is that the legislators are watching very closely on what we are planning or thinking of doing. So we have to make sure, you know, the feedback that I've been hearing is that they're looking for clearly tangible proposals and options. And, you know, all due respect to Anthony for taking the time and effort to put together this visionary plan, but the reality of it is that when the legislature is going to have to take up the difficult task of discussing whether or not the GET is going to be extended or not, and if it is, whether or not it's going to continue to go towards transportation or towards other community needs that they feel may be just as important, if not more important, than transportation. These are the kind of harsh realities that we're going to have to face. And we, if we're going to make an argument and put an argument forward for extensions to rail, which I believe are good arguments, because we can see the benefits as we open stations, ridership is going up, and we're getting a lot of positive response from people in the community that they want the stations to come to their community. But the harsh reality is that we have to put forward tangible options that are realistic and doable. So subsequent to Bill 60, we established another PIG to look at more tangible asks and deliverables that hopefully will resonate with the legislators and help us move the project forward. So I guess that's a long way of saying that, I think what I'm hearing from everybody is that the PIG report is out there. It includes the report as an appendix from the PIG chair, Anthony Alto. It's for everybody to read the PIG, and I believe unless the board decides to take any kind of further action on it, it is what it is. The PIG did vote as a majority not to support Appendix A. Not that we don't disagree, it's just that we don't, for the reasons that I've just stated, we don't necessarily support adopting it or officially as a board report. So unless there's any other further discussion, Anthony, if you want to.
No, I don't have any problem with anything that you've said. The reason that we didn't use HART resources and ask for any HART time is precisely because we didn't have the authority. Bill 60 hadn't passed. This was a conversation that I had with Colleen Hanabusa, and she said, well, do what you can without using HART resources. And we were very fortunate to have some very experienced individuals who were prepared. In some cases, they literally put in hundreds of hours. So this isn't stuff that's put together by amateurs. It is people who are experts in their field, but it wasn't we didn't use HART resources. And the last comment I'll make is on the LPA. I do think it's a bit ridiculous that the council feels it needs to tie itself to a decision and to research that was done more than 20 years ago. And I've talked to the chair, and he says that he thinks that the LPA will have to be amended. It may well be that we can't follow the LPA in the area of Ala Moana because of construction that's happened in the last 20 years. Out west, the LPA designates a route that goes through an area that has subsequently been designated part on the National Historic Register, the Oahu Plains Battlefield. So the route simply, the guideway can't go through that. So the LPA is going to have to be changed out there, and that's the assumption made by the director of OMPO as well. So I'm going to go to the council and suggest that they reconsider the commitment to the LPA, that after 20 years it's appropriate for them to discuss an alternative LPA. But I understand perfectly the concerns that you and Roger had in the PIG of asserting that you want to stay within the law. The LPA is what it is, and so that's an issue for the council.
Yeah, Yeah, well, I appreciate, Anthony, and not to belabor it, but, in addition to staying within what we're authorized to do by law, we also have to, deal with the political realities that we face today. And that also is part of, at least my reasoning, is knowing what the political realities are and what their expectations are. Maybe different as far as interpretation between individuals, but, nonetheless, what we do here is scrutinized tremendously, and I'm sure comments made here today will be, interpreted one way or the other. But I think we all share a common interest in what we believe is doing the right thing for the project. So, with that said, if there's no, yes,
Just
John.
One thought.
Yeah.
So this whole discussion is reminding me that, we're, at least our board here, we're all volunteers. And the amount of effort that went into preparing the minority report is tremendous. We all acknowledge that. Knowing that we're all volunteers here, I wanted to acknowledge how brave it is of Anthony to come out with this information and for his vision, sharing his vision. It's definitely going to be a lightning rod of criticism. I know that. It takes a lot of bravery to stick your neck out and share your opinion like that. And whether or not you believe in what the report says, I just wanted to acknowledge Anthony's bravery for stepping up and for sharing his vision with all of us.
Yes, Kaulana.
And with that said, Anthony, for me, as a new board member coming on and knowing that you put in the time and effort, just think of it this way, that you're passing on the information now to us so that we can use it as we move forward. Regardless if it's approved by the board or not, just know that the work that you did is passed down to us. And I think that's something that we should always remember as board members, is the contributions that we make here is not just for the now, but it's for the future. So that like you had described it as a visionary report, perhaps there's some things that we'll take that into consideration when we move forward. So I just hope that you feel that the work that you've done not only is appreciated, but it's something that we're going to take into the future of this too. So thank you.
Anybody else? Further discussion, comments? Okay, so if I'm not mistaken, we are not going to take any action on this item. We appreciate the discussion. Anthony, appreciate your hard work. Roger, everybody that participated. And we look forward to the future outcome from other permitted interaction groups and continuing on with this discussion of extensions and whatnot. If there's no further discussion, let's move on to agenda item number 9, summary of board member requests. Carolyn?
Thank you, Chair. There were no requests made during the Board of Directors meeting.
None at all?
Wait, no, I can't do Carolyn to provide 2026-27 conferences to board, and then do some background on joint development agreements.
Yeah, so just to reiterate, the Carolyn, the remainder of the conferences for 26 and 27, and just brief description, maybe circulate it to all the board members, everyone, for them to consider. And then the second one was a little bit more background on joint development agreements and how that might maybe be an alternative financing tool, yeah.
To that point, I know UMPO has brought in speakers from time to time. I think it would be a great thing for UMPO in their continuing education to perhaps bring in a couple of the practitioners who have successfully done joint development on the continent to talk through that. I mean, Mark has been having lectures about every quarter or so, and of course, he has to decide, he's leaving, by the way, so he's maybe his next predecessor, but joint development is complicated, but it is a real valuable tool if it can be realized, and maybe continuing education for the board and even for Hart too would be helpful to figure out the full potential of joint development here.
To add to what Roger said, the city a while ago had a bring in speakers from JR train system in Tokyo, Japan, and they don't care about the losing record on trains because they are the mixed-use joint development capital for train system, and they have small little cities built around a train station, and they get most of their revenue not from the train ridership, but from that mixed-use development that's built around the station. So, I mean, it's doable if you have the wherewithal and the talent to do it. So, yeah, we could. And Mark is really personally knowledgeable about TOD and some of the other alternative transportation strategies. So that would be good if we had a presentation.
One of the barriers in the past has been that in the U.S. There are very specific FTA rules over how joint development works. And while it's useful, I think, to bring in the commercial part of it, of Tokyo and other parts of the world where they do it all the time, I think it would also be helpful to get a better understanding of what the rules are for FTA and the potential and what you have to do in order to do it. And that was kind of what I was thinking, was that there are joint developments that have occurred in the U.S. and there's many people that are knowledgeable about them, but it is complicated and you have to navigate through the rules pretty carefully in order to make sure that you're not providing benefits to private sector people while you're in bed with them in a joint development. So that's what I think would be useful, to understand the potential and the limitations.
Carolyn, you got all that? No, I'm just kidding.
I'm listening, and I wanted to clarify. Sorry, I wanted to clarify. So are you making a formal request that you would like?
I think that's, go ahead.
I think it would be, if the opportunity presents itself, I don't necessarily mean that this board has to do that, but I think that if the opportunity presents itself, I think it would be useful for the whole community to get an opportunity to see that. And I, for one, will volunteer to talk to Mark to see if we could download that to UMPO to maybe consider in upcoming events.
Chair, I just point out that the governor set up a TOD task force.
Council.
Laurie and I both serve in it. And regrettably, in my opinion, the first recommendation that they've made is that we should build an express line along the guideway so that we could have an express train from one end of the island to the other, which we both think is a ridiculous idea. But that was their first recommendation.
Yeah. This ain't New York.
It's not Tokyo either.
Yeah.
So, Roger, I'm not sure, but maybe you can connect your resources with the chair of the Permitted Interaction Group. Maybe that's a way we could get some of this discussion accelerated and on record in some way. I don't know.
Okay. I'll explore it to see what we have available.
Maybe there's opportunities on the west side for a joint development agreement.
Or even on the east side. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
One last thing, Chair. Can we ask somebody to do something about the temperature in here for the next meeting?
Well, I think it keeps us all awake.
Intentionally, yeah.
It's keeping us awake because we're shivering. Yeah, I'm shivering.
Okay, so if there's no other, we'll figure that out, Anthony. But if there's no other business, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.
We appreciate all the work that you did with that report.
See you folks next week, or next